Hey, this is Cole, just popping in with a quick reminder of 2 ways you can support this show and this network. First, there's the Patreon, patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. That's a great way to support us directly. But this episode, we're talking about some books, and Amazon is a good place to buy some books. If you're going to be following along, I recommend you go to Duckfeed.tv/tipjar, use our link, and we get a cut of whatever you buy. Cut us in on that action by going to Duckfeed.tv/tipjar. All right, that's enough.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a favorite of the Spiral.
Yes, and this week we have the first of our off-season specials here as we kind of bridge the time between Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. And this week we are talking about 2 pieces of fiction. One is a manga, the other is a novella. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. Novella is the word I would use.
Yeah.
I like novella Ella.
Yeah.
My novella Ella.
And the manga is Uzumaki, and the novella is Shadow Over Innsmouth.
Yeah. And the clearest point of reference, like it probably seems a little bit like we haven't shaken off the Bloodborne blood. But so the clearest point of reference to this is the fishing village in Bloodborne. However, there are some other ties and everything that are kind of aesthetic between these things. Not tons other than Bloodborne, but there are some. And then also it's interesting stuff that we want to cover, and, got to cover something. Like, we could just, take one of these off seasons and just let's go through all the Kingsfields or whatever. But for those who, when we do a season of the show, we're playing a 25-hour game, 35-hour game over the course of a year.
Right.
So it's fairly easy to fit into our schedules. If we were just to say let's do the other Kingfield games and both Shadow Tower games during the off season, podcast time, we have time for that. Actually playing the game time, we don't.
Right.
So there's an element of this, this is something we wanted to cover, but there's an element of it that's practical, where we are doing things that are lower kind of calorie to digest, and then also it feels nice to not play a video game sometimes.
Yeah. It's nice to talk about different forms of media too. I mean, we found that out with our previous specials, the Lovecraft special and the Brotherhood of the Wolf one. These are fun things to do, and it is a shrewd way to buffer things out. And it's not just a logistical concern, as we said. Yeah. There are thematic resonances here.
It's both, you know. And so some of the things we'll be doing during the off season are more connected. Some of them are less connected, but we think that it's all at least tangentially connected, and at least all interesting and worth talking about. And in the case of this episode, and I think all of the off season stuff we're doing, there's an element of recommendation to it.
Oh my gosh.
This is something that these are all things that would be cool to experience, that we at least got a little bit of the same vibe from. So if you are a big fan of Bloodborne, I feel fairly comfortable saying you'll like the stuff.
Yes. In fact, I would even go so far as to say as Uzumaki is one of my favorite things we've covered for a show.
It's really great.
Yeah.
I really love it. I'm maybe not there, but I would be if it ended a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
We'll get into it. I should also mention that we decided to cover Uzumaki kind of right after I read it, just for pleasure. Not right after though, so it's not 100% fresh in my memory. If I get tiny details wrong, you guys will have to forgive me.
Yes,
because it reads quick, but it's also a lot of pages, and I didn't have time to reread it.
Right.
Given that I just read it a month ago.
Yeah. So. That said, I would recommend anybody who is interested in this go and check this out. Even if you are going to hear this and be like, all right, they've described the plot, the art in this and the actual experience of, going through it beat by beat. This is a very dense piece of work visually. And you're still going to get an awful lot out of this, even if you know the punchlines to the various chapters. And it's very reasonably priced, and you can get through it in, like, for me, and I'm a slow reader, and I like to look at all the pretty pictures, it took me like 2 nights to read.
Yeah, it goes by quick. It's and it's also like when you say it's a recommendation, it's not like so this is nauseating. Like this is a nauseating work. I feel like you have to be, the more you're going to like Uzumaki, the more that you respond specifically to like a certain kind of like queasy Vaseline covered body horror.
Right.
And if that is a thing for you, which it is for me and Cole, this is a 100% unqualified recommendation. If you have a weak stomach, or if this stuff, I can also imagine like the user who looks at these designs that are really working on you and I, and just thinking it looks silly.
Yeah, so a lot of people in Slack actually were saying, "Hey, this is really funny," and it is. Like
it's kind. There's a couple jokes in it.
No, I mean,
more
like,
or less like couldn't smile through the like intense quease.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, horror and comedy are so related, and so like I would laugh at something as a way to cope with it.
Yeah.
Because you see some just incredibly outlandish things. Like Junji Ito believes that every person is made of silly putty.
Or they can be.
Yes.
Like we're all
the
one bad
conditions
day
are right.
away from. Yeah.
Yes.
We're one bad day away from regressing to our silly putty stage.
Hey, Gary, do you see that crazy hole over there?
It was made for me. I like, and that stuff works for me. And like, so I guess what I'm getting at is that like, if you just find it funny, I don't think this is like a good book, right? Like if this isn't scaring you on some level, I think it's just goofy.
Yeah.
But like it works on me in a real big bad way.
Yeah.
I can just, in that way that I can imagine it just not working for somebody too.
Yeah. And lest you think that it only works on the gross out kind of side of things, this will make you paranoid. Like this is this is a work of just like claustrophobic paranoia.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Those are the kind of the two primary themes are like, the horror of like, when you see like a wound or something like that, you see like an arm broken the wrong way, and just that visceral like, oh, bodies don't work that way. Yeah, like it kind of sets you into that state, and you are in that state for the entire read. Like, oh, bodies don't work that way. That's unnerving to watch, and it kind of does that. It utilizes that to great effect while also having kind of a grander atmosphere and story. Like it's like the actual like the plot of this is the weakest part, I think.
Once it decides to start having a plot, it's really
I think that's when
it falls down.
That's when I think it stops it from being a great work and makes it instead like 100% mandatory, interesting, and effective, but not one of the greatest things we've like. It doesn't feel cohesive enough for me to put it there. But it does, boy, does it do the things it does better than just about anything.
Yeah, I put it up there
because it just doesn't do everything.
I put it up there because it's very effective, and it is so incredibly inventive that like it to me, like the power and number of the ideas kind of overwhelms any need for me to see them connected in a very satisfying way.
Yeah. I can definitely I can see that. So let's get into it. So Uzumaki is a horror manga by Junji Ito that originally ran in Big Comic Spirits from 1998 to 1999.
Yes, and the version that we're reading has been translated, and it is kind of put together into a large Bible-sized hardcover. Yeah. Yes,
it's a family Bible from like the worst family.
And it is about this town on the coast of Japan called Kuruzocho, which is cursed by spirals. Uzumaki is Japanese for spiral, in fact.
Yeah, and so we're following kind of two characters here. One who is clearly our main character, Kairi. Why is Kairi played by Molly Spiralwald? Like,
no, I just put that in there because she is very much like, she's pretty bland and has like designated. She's the designated hero.
She's an every girl.
Yeah, every girl.
Like she's a girl next door.
Yeah.
And then her boyfriend, Suichi, whose dad is the first one to succumb to the spiral, and who, like, I kept thinking was going to kind of hog the spotlight and never really does.
He just kind of comes in at the end and rescues everything. He is the heroic hikikomori.
Yeah, he's a little Jack Kelso, but like at the very end, and boy, things don't end well for anyone involved.
So yeah, Molly Ringwald and Kelso, they kind of deal with this Curse of the Spiral here in kind of two parts to this story. The first half is kind of this monster of the week, kind of X-Files kind of thing, where something horrible happens, like unspeakable. And there's kind of very little carryover from chapter to chapter. Like, there is no plot. It is just Junji Ito has crazy ideas and then shows them to you.
This part's the best.
Yes.
This to my mind, like, this is the best part of the book. It is great. Like, every one of these ideas is imaginative and cool. The weird way that the town doesn't just like start committing mass suicide or something, like the muted reactions, I think, work really well in that kind of Lynchian horror way.
The complete dream-like nonplusedness.
Yeah, like everyone just kind of not reacting to these things that are just so bonkers. Like, this works so well. The last third of the game, where it gets a little bit more plotty, and kind of ends in a real, like, I don't know, like Lithos Ex Machina kind of thing. Like, it is just like this, there's a thing, and it's doing the thing, and it's still going to do the thing. And it's like, I don't want to explain. Like, I don't want, like, I have cursed your town with the spiral because long ago only straight lines were used in my cage, or something like that. I don't know how you'd end a story like this. But it's not, it's not going to end like any of the individual chapter ends where everyone just kind of shrugs at the horror. I think those endings work. I think that it's like the strain of being a larger piece. Like the other, short story things I've read, like, I'm really happy to just have them end with like, well, this is just how things are now. Fuck, and I think that there's an urge, since this is such like, it's like a novelistic work, to like have an actual, pin on it. Which, I like it a little bit less. So that's A-okay.
Yeah. I don't mind the ending as much, but that is entirely, I think, up to taste.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it. Like, I don't hate it. I just think that it's like, I was loving it up until that point, and then I just had a real, like, oh, that's it? Like a real shrug feeling at the end.
Yeah, so that last third, really, like we said, they tries to put a bow on it, but is has nothing really to do with the first half, aside from taking little elements that pop up every once in a while and then just put it into a post-apocalyptic story. So the story was inspired by Ito wanting to write a story, to create a manga about growing up in an incredibly long traditional row house, like in one of these Japanese traditional style houses. And after seeing a mosquito coil, which Kelso informs us is the best way to
commit arson.
To commit arson. He realizes that the spiral would be the best shape to do that, and he seeks to kind of subvert the positive. You know what? Spirals have been getting a free ride in the media for far too long.
Well, they totally have. Like, I was thinking about this. I had a friend growing up who got like super obsessed with the golden ratio.
Oh yeah.
Which is a spiral thing, and just like was drawing it everywhere, and it kind of made. That's what I thought of when reading this. It's like, oh, that's like this could have happened to my buddy Greg. Like, he could have been a snail boy. So let's go into it. We're gonna go. There's tons of chapters. We're gonna go through each one, but we're not gonna detail everything that happened, because for the first 2/3, as we mentioned, there's no connective tissue.
Right.
The story just kind of presents an idea, and we'll kind of talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
The spiral obsession.
The spiral obsession. This is a two-parter, and it kind of sets things up. It introduces us to Shuichi and Kiri. Kiri is just, again, Molly Ringwald every girl, and Shuichi wants to get out of town because he feels like something is wrong, and his dad is obsessed with spirals, to the point where he has worked to curl his tongue in an otherworldly way and move his eyes independently.
Yes. Yep. And this kind of introduces something that's going to keep happening with the book, where it's using the form really well to kind of have the equivalent, like the comic equivalent of jump scares, right? Like, you turn the page and there's just like a crazy reveal.
Oh, I love that so much. Like, every page, I was worried something would be just like, right there on my face. They
do a really good job of it. Like, it is using the form in every possible way, that you can do it. So it is A+, A+ for that. So Kiri's dad, however, is a potter. And, Shuichi, how are you saying that?
I say Shuichi.
Shuichi commissions a pot from Kiri's dad, saying pottery is the art of the spiral. At this point, he's has a vague unease, but he's not terrified, which it will eventually happen.
Yeah, and this obsession goes so far as to make the dad, again, Shuichi's dad, want to become a spiral. So we have another one of these crazy scares where you turn the page and he is inside this hot tub having spiraled himself. Basically, he looks like soft serve inside of this.
He's liquid and he's been like twirled.
Yes.
It's like soft serve is a good way. The a lot of depictions of Hastur look like this. Or like this kind of giant liquid man. Hastur being the he who should not be named. So if you never hear this podcast, that will not be surprised. So that's scary enough. However, so when he is cremated, his ashes spiral up into the sky and then fall down, via rain, or through the sky into this lake at the center of town, similar to Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
So you get the sense that like there was already the curse, but now it's in the fucking water.
Yeah. And this is the lake at the very center of town that everybody kind of drinks from and lives by. It's kind of the lifeblood of the of the town here. And this is so traumatized Shuichi's mom that she develops this extreme phobia. She sees her husband in every spiral around her to the point where she is terrified of the whorls in her hair and cuts that off, and also cuts off her fingerprints in a very scary like this makes scissors a scary thing.
Yes. And this is she ends up in the hospital here at this point.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah. So a couple things I'm going to ask you because I don't totally remember. Because what's happening is she's trying to get rid of all the spirals on her body, and there's a diagram, like a medical diagram, that shows the cochlea. And if you don't know, that's a weird snail that lives in your ear and translates things for you. And Shuichi does his best to like try to hide this thing from his mom because like this ain't gonna be great,
Nope. I love that reveal because like the doctor is talking and then it's several panels of like zooming in on this thing. Like I could just picture the film cuts like
no, totally. Like this is like he's great at using the visual language of comics. Like it is masterclass quality in that stuff. So with this, he's trying to hide it. However, Dad comes back as a centipede. I don't know if it's like a ghost centipede or just a regular centipede.
No, just like a centipede with his head again in a spiral.
Like a man centipede. There's your tie to souls. He comes back as a Latria man centipede, and also has a whirl in her IV bottle. Says like, hey, you think you got all the spirals? There's one deep inside your ear, which that's terrifying. Being scared of something inside your ear is terrifying. Be
anything
with earwig or like a cochlea.
Okay, so you know how most people are like really upset about stuff happening to their eyes?
Yeah.
I'm that way about my ears.
Oh, sure. Can't read Macbeth.
Everything about, kind of.
Yeah.
But just the idea of her taking these scissors and driving it into both her ears to the point, like it doesn't just regulate hearing, it also regulates your balance. It shows, so she is bedridden and dies shortly after because of this.
Well, it's not just her balance. It gives her specifically vertigo, which is a form of kind of the spiral. So she sees, the world is spinning.
Right.
Like she can't escape it. So she eventually dies, and that kind of sets off, Shuichi and his character and kind of his descent into darkness, and is the instigating event in the town, leading to the next set of chapters, the Scar, where a girl named Azami moves in from a nearby city, and she has a crescent scar on her forehead, and it causes all the boys to be obsessed with her. However, this turns into a spiral after Shuichi rejects her, because he knows that it's secretly a spiral.
The town has turned her into this and kind of amplifies her. She's almost like predatory in this a little bit. Like she does not take a hint.
No, not at all.
She continues to be alluring because of, again, this kind of mesmerism associated with the spiral to this other boy who kind of takes a liking to her. But she is fixated on Shuichi as this kind of goes on, and they go back and forth, and the spiral bores into her eye.
Yes, she looks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, she looks like the T-1000 when he gets shotgunned in the face. Yeah.
I can't seem to focus my left eye. Like she pulls down a hood and reveals that this is like just kind of like cut in. It's not like a drill into the side of her head, and her eye is kind of like hanging half out of its socket.
Anytime somebody has something seriously wrong with them, and then they say something that you would say if you just have a minor ailment. That's great.
Yeah.
Like I can't. It's hard for me to think of other examples, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like I can't seem to I can't seem to feel my hand, and then like there's no hand. Something like that.
What's that smell after oh gosh, I was about to say after Edward Norton shoots himself in Fight Club.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So she ends up devouring this admirer she has with her weird spiral face mouth.
Yeah, like just like she's a worm. Like she drags him in head first, like almost in a kiss. And after she devours him, the spiral, I have it in the notes here as it unravels her, but it's a little bit more like cosmic than that. It's like a black hole that's like sucking her inward. It's like an Ouroboros completed. Like she just disappears without a trace.
Yep. And that's her. Like she even, literally parts of her body rip off of her to get sucked into her black hole torso.
Yeah.
That she has. I have the book in front of me, and now I realize like I can just read along. So we move on to the after this. Again, this is some real horrific shit, and everyone's just like, "Oh, that's unusual,"
wow.
Another day.
It's almost like there's a sense of denial at this point. Like people are like writing it off as urban legend. I can see that in the margins.
Yeah. Yep. So we move on to the firing effect.
Yes.
And Kiri's dad, who is the potter, if you recall, starts becoming obsessed with spirals because of what Shuichi's dad said about pottery.
Yes, and all of the things that he makes, for some strange reason, we're going to find out in about 2 bullet points, starts developing these spirals and almost like these screaming face appearances as he fires them, like the firing effect as the clay kind of contracts as the moisture kind of leaves it. And then we find out that as he does this at night, the clay is screaming.
Well, and that's because he's getting the clay from the lake.
Yes. And Shuichi finds this out because he comes over for dinner. He's been a shut-in ever since his parents died. Just suck it up, guy. And he's like, there's spirals on this place. Like, yeah, I made it out of this dead body clay at the center of town.
Yeah, this is the rendered fat of your dad you're eating off of. So hope you're good with that.
And he sees this dad's face in there. I don't know if that's a hallucination or, it's the town specifically trying to fuck with him.
Yeah. Well, they're eating spaghetti too, so it's like already spirals. And then the even the pottery before it gets faces is so gross and creepy. It's so something. Talking about this, Jerks and Frontiers Richard did a video on the fishing village recently, and he talks about Ito being kind of called one of the heirs to Lovecraft, and like this is one of those ways in which he is, that I see, where like he's visually representing objects that unnerve you really successfully.
Yeah.
Like, Lovecraft is often, it's called unfilmable, like it's unfilmable cinema. And as we'll talk a little bit about at the end, there's a movie for Uzumaki that is not very well liked.
Right.
And because it is kind of an unfilmable thing, but he does a really good job of like, this is just pottery, but like, boy, is it unnerving to look at.
Yeah. Like in the
like
Gestalt,
it's just organic and like, yeah.
As a whole, you look at it and say, hey, that's a pot. But in the details and in the like the suggestions of the curves of these things, it takes on this kind of alien aspect.
Yeah. Yep. So Shuichi hears that he's of these plates, and he tries to stop him. However, because the pots are freaking out, the souls are being burned. The cottage eventually burns down, and Dad still digs up the pots. He still needs them.
Yeah,
and
it's
wants
like
them.
He fishes them out of the ashes.
Yes.
So it is starting to spread. This is not, just this strange girl who came from out of town and Shuichi's dad. Like it is slowly going into other more kind of stable pillars of the society.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also kind of going to the bottom as well, because in Twisted Souls, we find out about these people who are living in these kind of ancient row houses that are spotted all throughout the town. And there's like a little bit here about how like, yeah, they're there, but you don't really notice them. You never really think about what's going on inside. And we get a little Romeo and Juliet story.
Yes. Yeah. Where there's 2 kids who live there and their parents hate each other, primarily through like economic insecurity that I feel like kind of culturally doesn't quite translate.
Right.
As well as it should be this kind of shame of poverty and kind of family name.
Yeah.
So eventually, these they see these two snakes making love and they get twisted together, and then after this Romeo and Juliet story kind of comes to a climax, the boy gets hit so hard that his body starts to twist.
Yeah, like his dad hits him, like trying to smack some sense into him, and like, boy, that's a fear of mine as well, like hitting somebody so hard that their neck twists around and snaps.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
which could happen.
I know, right? My body is a weapon.
I had one of my friends. I once shook him as a joke once, and he convinced me that I snapped something, and he couldn't move.
Oh,
and he convinced me for like 20 minutes. Like I was like, he didn't tell me until I was going to call 911.
Oh God.
Yeah, because I was like, you're fucking with me. He's like, I'm not fucking with you, and then he really poured it on.
Yeah.
It was like that kind of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, he twists around, and this kind of instigates his greater transformation, right? As he kind of like intertwines with his girlfriend. She is transformed by this as well, and they're by the beach, and this is kind of funny and sweet to me. Like this is not as scary, I think, as some of the other endings, because they're together and they just kind of like spiral off as this big kind of spout into the sea.
Yeah, I think that this is trying to cash, or the ending kind of tries to cash on that as well. I don't think it's necessarily as scary, but I didn't find it funny. Like it's not. It's like this just ended up feeling like kind of like. It's like if you sit down and you think like you sit down with pen and paper and wrote down every single way that a spiral could express itself. This one would be on there, but it's this is not my favorite story in the thing.
Right.
It's like, all right, I gotcha.
And it feels like that was part of the process for Ito, actually, because
100%.
He uses every part of the buffalo here.
100%. Every part of the snail gets used, like literally and figuratively. Like it is. I think that's definitely the case, and I think that I could see this being here as kind of just foreshadowing for the ending. Like this just ends up needing to establish that there's this weird positive side to things.
Yeah, this is how love is affected. Like we've seen how like jealousy is manifested. We've seen how obsession is manifested. Like this is kind of taking this base symbol and then applying it in extremes to people's bodies and minds.
Yeah, I don't even know if he started from a place of emotion so much as just like, hey, snakes wrap around each other.
Right.
I think they're mostly come from visual cues. I think that like if you want to project some kind of like greater thematic resonance, I think there are the different emotional frames. But it's hard for me to imagine him starting with that. I think it was just literally like what spirals.
I don't think he started with that. I think that he thought what spirals, and then what resonates with that. Like how can I match these up in kind of poignant ways?
Yeah. And to varying degrees of success, like the visual and horror aspects always work. The emotionally resonant aspects don't, in my mind. But in this case, like it's fine. Yeah. But luckily we're moving on to something weirder here with the Medusa chapter.
This is the most anime thing in this. And notice that at the beginning of this we didn't hem and haw about liking a manga or anime thing like we did with Berserk. Like this is I can't even like say that. Like this is just a good thing. It doesn't matter what it is. Yeah.
In reminding myself of this chapter, looking through it, this is dumb anime bullshit though. This is the one chapter where it's like, okay, a bunch of schoolgirls fight with magic hair. Like, give me a goddamn break.
Yeah,
like that's not cool.
Although it should be said that like it was nice to see some variety. If he just kept hitting the same note over and over again, it really would have been like just too much, I think.
Well, and also hair can be curly. Like he has to, like literally everything that can be a spiral has to be checked off. And I'm not saying that as a dismissive thing. Like he's exploring every variation on that idea. So, in this, there's a boy who jumps off this roof to get attention, and Shuichi thinks it's spiral related because he thinks everything is spiral related, specifically to mesmerism. Like somebody's been mesmerized.
Yes.
By this. If you imagine the old hypnotist twirling the penguin from Batman 2. Yeah. And Kairi, our main character, this is the first time it's directly affected her body. Her hair starts growing into a spiral and develops a life of its own, drawing everyone's attention.
Hence the title Medusa.
Yes. She does not want the attention, but it is coming anyway.
Yes, and it kind of like stands up. It's very snake-like, and it kind of gets bigger and bigger and grows out. And like, again, we get that dreamlike disinterest as like, all right, well, I guess that's just what she is now.
Yeah. And another girl who actually wants the attention starts a hair-on-hair battle with her. And it is the most anime thing in the book. Yeah. So they get into a hair fight.
They trade blows with this, and like they're it's the hair that is fighting, like not them. Really, like gosh, Kiri has no interest in perpetuating this, and
any of it.
Yeah, like and like nothing. And like the other girl is jealous, but really it's the hair that is like taking this and amplifying it. And Shuichi recognizes that this is actually like the hair is animating itself by sucking the energy out of the host, and so he cuts off Kiri's hair, while as the other girl, the jealous girl, is wrapped around a light pole. And the process is complete. The parasitism is done, and she is skeletonized.
Yes. And that's really it with that. Moving on to Jack in the Box here. So the town stops cremating bodies. So a couple of corpses too late, but there are these smoke spirals, and people are starting to make boring practical responses to this in their muted reaction. And they start burying them.
Yeah.
Which is, you've got a note here, and I did not do this research, but that is an unsettling thing for Japanese people.
Yes. They tend to cremate, based on what I understand. I know that like this was all Uzumaki related research, and like, oh, why are they so like weirded out by that? I'm not casting a general assumption about Japanese people. This is something that came up. And
like you're famous for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I do. But like just that I can see that. Like take it on its face. It's weird that we put people's bodies in the ground. I don't want to turn this into a religious or spiritual discussion, but it is pretty weird.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but kind of related to this, a boy, or unrelated for now, a boy named Jack has taken an interest in Kiri and kind of has been her shadow since grade school, kind of her unwanted admirer. And he shows this affection in a very childlike way, jumping out from behind cars or behind walls or around corners, trying to startle her. Like I'm pulling your hair because I like you.
Yeah. Yep. And he's fairly obnoxious. She continues to turn him down, kind of over and over, until eventually he throws himself in front of a car and is wrapped around the axle.
I saw somebody do this in TV.
Yep. So he had given her this gift, and she opens it, and it is, of course, a Jack in the Box,
right?
Which turns into a haunted Jack in the Box, and tells her that it's her fault.
Yes,
and stuff.
And this is enough to convince her and Shuichi to go do some good old fashioned grave robbing.
Yep. So they head there, and he pops out of his grave and starts coming after them in whatever the jumping kind of undead thing is. Like that's what it reminded me of. I know that's a Chinese thing. That's like Chinese vampires, right?
I think.
But I think there's a jumping undead thing, and I don't know. I'm
Spring
not
Heel Jack.
No, a jumping undead.
Yeah.
So nothing like Spring-Heeled Jack. In specifically in Japanese or Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm.
So Spring-Heeled Jack being a weird. I don't know. Is that like some kind of urban legend that? Not what I mean.
I think it's from the British Isles. No, I was being flip.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something like that. And I think that this is our reference to that.
Yeah.
I could be wrong though.
Yeah, but this is kind of a terrifying chase scene. I love the way that everything is kind of composed. Like, you can really get a sense of the arcs that he's doing. Like, this is how he moves from this kind of like spring that is sticking out of the lower half of his body. And as he's going along, like, it is ripping his body apart. Like, things are falling off of him. And it's almost like inexplicably he's stitched together. Like, maybe like the mortician did that for an open casket funeral. I don't know, but
yeah, no, that's definitely. I think there's a line about that.
Yeah.
They put him back together so he could be in in a regular funeral, even though he still looks terrifying.
Yeah.
And so the tire spring that fused with his spine, like this is almost like this is just like a ghost story.
Yeah.
This is like a zombie story. Things get super weird next, and this is where the book comes alive for me.
Me too. This is one of the most upsetting chapters, I think.
Absolutely. Like this is the best.
Yeah.
So this is the snail.
Yes, and there's this slow, unpopular boy named Katakama. And he only shows up when it rains, I guess, just because of themes.
Because you can do that in here. And everyone's just like, oh, huh. Okay. He doesn't show up for school. All right.
Yeah.
And he's real slow.
Yeah. And he's got kind of a dopey expression. Like, just something's off about the kid.
I love his face. Like, I love everything about the way he is drawn pre-transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he looks like the thing he turns into before he turns into it.
Right. Like so much so that it's like actually almost outside of the style a little bit. Like there's already something off and other about him.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So he gets beat up and bullied because he's the sweaty slow kid, a pain I know well. And the bullies yank off his shirt in the locker room, and they find a big spiral on his back, and he kind of like just crawls away like on his front.
Yeah,
which he's new. Like he's just dragging dick.
Yeah,
like,
no.
And get impetigo, bro. Like that ain't gonna go well for you.
Yeah, no. And he's leaving a trail of something behind him. And if you're dry, he's just slicking some pre on the locker room floor. I don't know.
Yeah, just a probiotic mess. Like yeah.
But he goes away, and then over the course of the next week, he slowly starts transforming into a snail.
He's like, so I love the implication because he's just like, he apologizes for it. You know, he says like, oh, it's swelling. You know, like turning into a snail person, which is something that's going to become a theme in this.
Yeah.
Affects your mind as well as your body.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's making you placid and even more passive.
Yeah.
And this is like passive town Japan. Like this is the most passive area in the world. And it's making them even more placid. So as it continues to grow and grow and grow, eventually he comes in as like a full snail man.
Yes, except for his face, and the transformation finalizes and culminates by him kind of climbing up the side of this building and then very like noisily like sprouting eye stalks.
Yeah, his eyes, and people like are kind of, shocked by this until eventually they're just like, well, we got to do something. Let's knock him off the side of the wall with brooms. And then put him in like a in a
chain link pen. Yeah.
Yeah. Chain link pen to feed him lettuce. And then the kids still tease him.
Yeah. Like
it's crazy.
He might as well be the school mascot at this point. The Caruso Show fighting snails.
It is. It's 100% what it is. And like, I watched some clips from the movie, and like this kind of happens in the movie. Like this is one of the scenes they actually do where they have like a news report of people watching these snails crawl up the building. And like, dude, let's say like Cole, you go in to record the level at one point, and Merkel is slowly turning into a snail. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden Merkel's a snail, right? Like, you wouldn't do this. I was going to ask what you do, but I couldn't think of it, like what the right answer is. But you wouldn't do this. Like you wouldn't be like, okay, Merkel, you live in my yard and a thing, and I'm gonna let bullies poke you, and that's it.
Well,
Merkel the snail boy.
I'd either donate him to science, or I would salt him and put him out of his misery.
Yeah. Salting him would be great because he would not want to live.
Right. Also, I like you continuing the trend of having horrible things happen to Ben in your hypotheticals.
He's my stock level protagonist. So the bully turns into snail too, and they eventually
throw him in there with him. I guess now you have a friend.
What's good for the geese, and like so they have a friend, and then they escape to go make weird snail love in the woods.
Yeah,
eventually lay eggs.
I forget. Do they show the weird spear like going in? Like, oh, he's attacking him. No, wait, he's actually making love, or am I just making this even weirder in my head?
I don't remember. Let me see if I can find the page. They show them kind of gooing together. I don't know if there's a spear, but they show them kind of making out a little bit.
Yeah.
They show them make out.
Okay. Never look up photos of how snails mate. It's very gross. But yeah, like they escape. Like obviously they could. Apparently snails can't climb on chain link fence. But they run off into the woods, and the teacher's like, well, we can't let this happen because they're obviously bumping gooey uglies. And
we don't want them breeding, which like, but it just feels like it's a level of concern that's like 17 steps past where you should be. Like, yes, you don't want them breeding, but aren't there things you don't want before that?
Yeah.
Like how did it get to this point?
Yeah. Like, did it just take you this long to find your torch and pitchfork? Like, come on, dog.
Yeah. Like, good night. And I can't remember when it happens. I think it's not yet though, where people are just like, oh shit, move. Like, let's get. I think at this point you can still leave.
No, it's only the you can still. I think you can still leave at this point. It's only after the storms that they make a point of saying you can't get out.
Yeah. It is bonkers. So they find the eggs and they crush them.
Yes.
But but so the teacher does that, and the teacher actually gets infected and becomes a snail man too.
Yeah, which this left me confused. Like, is this actually a physical contagion? Like, often the margins and things we're not saying is like usually towards the beginning of a chapter, Suichi will have like a hypothesis about the way this spreads. Like,
yes.
He refers to it as a contamination, is usually what it is. Like, he refers to it as like an infestation, like something is kind of like creeping in and worming its way in at the edges and in the cracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this really made me think like, oh man, anybody who's touched anybody who has a spiral, like I thought this was kind of going towards like a zombie kind of thing.
Oh, sure.
When in reality, it's far more symbolic than that.
Yeah, it's symbolic, but then also just kind of like as the creep demands.
Yep.
So moving on to one of my less favorite ones, the Black Lighthouse. Huh. Yeah, I don't care for this that much. It's kind of interesting, but just not enough. Like after the snail one, like I just I was ramped up for weird shit, and not that much weird shit happens in this one. Some of the better weird shit is right after this, but this is I marked this one as plot important when I was making my notes. Like, oh, this sets up something about the town, and actually this is where we start getting some continuity. Like the results of this lead into the next several chapters. Yeah. So I can get that. I can get behind that, but keeping in mind that like the interconnected stuff is not my favorite stuff in general.
Yeah.
Like I'm here for weird snail people. Like I came for the snails. I'll leave for the snails. And none of it is a chore. Like when I say it's one of my less favorites, it's just literally because it's bookended by two of my favorites.
Yeah.
So, so there's an abandoned lighthouse in the town.
Yes. And every night at dusk, it kind of bursts out these starry night beams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're kids that go to explore it, but they keep climbing. And as they do, they find charred bodies of adults who had disappeared there before.
The idea of an infinite lighthouse, man. Just like we keep going until it decides that it wants us to get to the top.
Yeah. There's in Astoria, Oregon. There's a it's not a lighthouse, but there's like a tower in the middle of town you can climb. That goes on forever, and like that's what this is like.
Yeah,
you just kind of go up it, and it's a really long way. It's not forever, but it just feels infinite. Like you can be in the middle, look up and look down, and not really, you can see because it's lit in there. But if it were like the lighting was a little bit lower, it would effectively be infinite.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of a spooky location.
Nice. I also dig this because it's one of the first indications that, this is not just evil that's within people. Like everything so far has been something, that has happened to a person. This is the first kind of indication that this is an evil place.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I dig that. Like I love a story about an evil place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But as they get to the top and they get to the actual room where the light is housed, this is a weirdly technical thing about lighting and about optics. But the Fresnel lens, which is normally a bunch of concentric circles kind of etched into a round glass surface, has melted and turned into a spiral. Really, dog? You're going to talk about a Fresnel lens?
Yeah, that was on the list. Like it's a possible spiral or spiral-like thing. It looks just like a big goo monster.
Yeah.
Like it's melted glass, but it just looks like a slime monster.
Mm-hmm.
So when they get up there, they realize like, oh shit, like great heat must have caused this. Mm-hmm. Let's get out of here. So Kiri and her brother barely escape. Right. But another boy gets baked alive.
Yeah, like they're chased down this infinite lighthouse spiral staircase by a wall of flame. And Kiri is kind of knocked out of commission by this. She is bruised and burned and scarred and all of it, although still pretty all throughout.
Yes.
And the same thing happens every night at dusk. Like just I want to just make a combination of all of the final panels, because all of them are just a declarative statement about the way things are now.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yep.
And they would all, at least the Monster of the Week ones would work as just individual, like similar to the This Hole Was Made for Me or the one where the thing washes up on the beach.
Yeah.
Like the Ito short stories online that you can find online, which I highly recommend.
Yeah.
Like those are wonderful. This Hole Was Made for Me is great.
Oh, the Enigma of Amigara Fault.
Yeah, that's so good. Like it's one of my favorite, one of the first like specifically manga things that I saw that I was like, this isn't schoolgirls fighting with their hair. This isn't like super magical, schoolgirl police squad. Like this is actually like, this is amazing.
That's so crazy because I had the same experience. Like I remember reading the Enigma of Amigara Fault like in the common hall of my college. Like, and my only previous, just like I was in between classes and somebody on essay was talking about it. I was like, huh, this is really cool, because my only exposure to this kind of stuff has been like Toonami up to this point.
Yeah.
And like Toonami was cool. Like, I liked the stuff that I watched on it, but like this felt like, pardon me, it felt like it was made for me. You know, and so I didn't associate Ito with the Enigma of Amigara Fault until much, much later. When I knew kind of like what the body of his work was and who he influenced. But like, yes, like this is like standout level stuff.
Yeah. We'll all take a moment now to mourn for the loss of a playable trailer.
Silent Hills, man.
Yeah. Silent Hills. Even though like so it's Ito. Who are the principals in that?
It was Ito, Guillermo del Toro, and Hideo Kojima.
Yeah, I think Kojima would have fucked it up.
I feel like Kojima
100%. Huh. I mean, there's no way that would be an additive presence. I guarantee it. It would have just made it crazy and not work. So, but the rest of it would have been interesting.
I disagree. So,
but, okay. Yeah. I think that you are less sick of that dude's stuff than I am at this point. But I'm also like, I'm in the perfect position to be sick of it, because like I'm playing a game I really enjoy, and every time his stink shows up, like it's taking me away from the part I like.
Yeah.
Even though I just got to the hospital stuff, and that's kind of cool.
Yep.
Anywho, yeah. Moving on from that digression. Let's talk about mosquitoes.
Yes. So this starts picking back up with some Monster of the Week kind of stuff, and it's the last hurrah really before things start getting really plotty. So Kiri is hospitalized, and over the course of this summer, as she is laid up, there is this kind of epidemic of these mosquitoes all over town that are flying in these very loose, languid spirals.
Yes, or these kind of like clouds of them.
Yes,
that move through too. Like that's something that's going on, and people are being found covered with these like huge holes that would be way too big for a mosquito. Like they look like and all their blood has been drained.
Yes,
so everyone just kind of the big town's collective shrug about this, and at the same time, Kiri's cousin, who's pregnant, stays with her in the room while she's recovering from her injuries. And at night, Kiri witnesses all of the pregnant women who have been bitten by mosquitoes going out with hand drills and massacring people to take their blood.
Yeah. Oh God, just those hand drills. There's a really wonderful frame that is not paid off for like until halfway through the rest of the chapter, where like somebody is like handed this thing that is wrapped in cloth. Like, hey, what's that? I'm like, oh, nothing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, that won't come back. But then it totally does. And again, a hand drill. What's on a hand drill, Gary?
Oh, it's
a spiral.
A handle.
Yeah. You can't use something without a handle. Your hands can't touch it. Yeah. No. But again, I love the idea of them becoming different people at night and then going out and feasting. Like during the day, nobody notices anything that's off. But, specifically because it's pregnant women, they are nourishing their young.
Exactly. Like the way the mosquitoes do. Like they're feeding their baby's blood. Something that's been a sub kind of plot throughout this whole thing that's going to be important later, so I want to make sure I mention it, is Shuchi, and who has been kind of in the margins. He's kind of become a recluse, but he's been stepping in to kind of help out Kiri.
Yes.
And steer her away from stuff when possible. And he's been, like, if there's anybody who's the voice of reason in town, like it's been him.
And I love the way they subvert that, because they set him up as having a mental break because of the trauma that happens in the first two chapters.
Yeah, but really he's just being the one person he's the last thing. Yeah,
he is the only person who is responding appropriately.
Yes, for sure. So like it is, he's been here, and that's just, I don't want to make it seem like he comes out of nowhere,
right?
When he comes back into the story.
No, he's usually serving as kind of like Deus Ex Machina, and like it makes it kind of like beautiful, because like the story opens with him urging Kiri to get out of town, and his continued presence is only because of her. Yeah. Like every time he shows up, it is a sacrifice.
He's the reason why he leaves his house. Right. And it's a big deal. It's like when what's his head leaves the house in Better Call Saul.
Right.
Yeah.
When Lenny leaves the house.
Yeah, Lenny.
He was missing Squiggy. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
Lenny was missing Squiggy. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Squiggy. What does Squiggy sound like? Squiggle. What's a squiggle? A spiral. Oh gosh.
Lenny and Spiral. Hello.
Is Spiral is Squiggy at the heart of the lake?
I think so. I'm just imagining a recontextualizing of Better Call Saul, where like his brother is scared of going outside because of spirals. Like you could probably recut like a trailer for that focused on him, where he just looks outside and sees, I don't know, mosquito coils.
Oh my gosh, if Vince Gilligan directed Uzumaki like miniseries.
Oh, that'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
Anybody doing a miniseries, that would have been the way to adapt this.
Oh yeah.
Like I think Shuichi gives her a bug spray in this one specifically, which like will drive off these pregnant ladies. and in the end, the big twist is that like it's all the ladies looking happy and nursing their bellies. And they needed blood for the babies. In several days, these babies nourished by human blood would be born. Dun, dun, dun.
Like, what did you expect?
Well, this is I expect this next chapter to turn my stomach really hard.
Oh my gosh, this is upsetting. The umbilical cord.
Yeah, which can sometimes be a spiral. So the babies are born.
Yes, the babies are born, and they're so sweet. Everybody is cooing and admiring them for being such wonderful little things. But there's something wrong with their bellies. Like there are these weird bulges underneath their clothes, right?
Yes, and around the same time, totally disconnected, the hospital starts serving these weird mushrooms to everyone.
Yeah, and again, everybody's raving about them. Like, oh gosh, they taste like meat. They're so savory.
And like the mushrooms do kind of taste like meat, but like I'm not going to eat like a haunted thing that I don't know like where it came from in this situation where it's like everyone, if I'm in a place where everyone just starts eating something, I'm going to be scared in general. And that instinct will pay off here.
So you never go to any restaurant that somebody recommends. Oh my gosh, their canapes are just out of this world.
If everyone's eating the canapes, or if the canapé tastes like what a canapé what not should taste. But the next detail, goddamn fucking scary, where Kiri starts overhearing the babies talking about returning to the womb.
I picture them with like really deep voices, like, yes, I yearn for the placid waters of my mother's womb.
And it's like, it's the kind of thing where like, again, when I was talking about, it's possible to think this is goofy. Like this is a detail that like, if you're in the wrong headspace for it, like you think that's goofy that babies are talking about it. But like this just ended up being really unnerving to me. Yeah.
Like Kirstie Alley is not involved in this at all.
No, not so whatsoever.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they need the doctor's help to do this.
And the doctor has been brainwashed by just these little foods.
Yeah. And just these mushrooms.
Yeah, these mushrooms, which are growing wherever any piece of the umbilical cord has found purchase on the floor. And these mushrooms, I can picture them swaying when I look at these frames. And like, mushrooms are otherworldly. We talked about that in the Bloodborne season, as we talked about like the morel mushrooms and the peanut head kind of things growing up. But like the idea of these things on stalks, like this is very much like, it feels like it is imagery that has been taken and put into other stuff that I like.
Yeah, and they're just gross-looking mushrooms. And, like, you can imagine the smell in the room, like, just that kind of, like, I don't know, like, raw chicken smell or something. Like, just something gross and blood. So eventually, Carrie finds that room full of mushrooms, and the doctor has put her cousin's baby back in her through sewing her into her stomach.
Like a reverse cesarean, almost?
Yeah. And not the reverse cesarean that caused the ending of Catch-22 to be so confusing.
It ends as it begins. Oh gosh, over Avignon. Oh, it's so cold. It's so cold. Put me back in my mother's womb. Milo sold the morphine. No.
But so now the mom, you think that she's just going to die and that's going to be the scary thing, but she's going to turn into a spiral blood monster.
Yeah, and she grows mosquitoes proboscis.
Yes.
And proceeds to kind of drain the people who are transfixed by these mushrooms. Like Kiri has thrown open the door, and the cousin has devoured the doctor, and these other patients like, yes, we must come in. And there's these shots of these patients just munching down on these mushrooms as like the cousin looms over her.
Yeah. Shudder. Big bad Shudder.
Good. And that makes this next chapter just such a weird wet fart. Like this should have been a lost chapter. Like this is as dumb as the lost chapter at the end of the hardcover.
That's the thing, is like just a lot of the chapters where I feel like they're explicitly just putting places in, for the plot. Just they're just weird. Like they just don't it's not like I don't want to sound like I'm just like I only can handle horror when it's about scary spirally things. I'm not obsessed with the spiral. I just think that like it's just like there's a bigger idea. Like nothing really happens here that feels noteworthy. It's important to move the plot, but it feels like setting pieces in place.
And also like this is like this increases the scale in a way that makes things a little bit less interesting.
Yeah.
To me, like all of a sudden, like, oh, there's a hurricane here. And yes, hurricanes on their face are very scary. Yes, hurricanes are also spirals. But like the execution of it, like it really should just be like a time skip after this, which is like, hurricanes have descended upon the town. And then all of a sudden, like this is a completely different story.
Yep.
Like I don't need Curie walking around oblivious by the fact that she is in the center of this hurricane. Like she's in the eye and she's unaware of the fact that this hurricane is following her and calling her name until Shuichi shows up. And when he tells her like, hey, this is happening, they go and hide. And then the hurricane throws them into the lake. Like, I really don't need that.
No. And that's really all that happens. It's pretty boring. We get into cooler stuff coming up.
Yes.
Which is nice. Even though, like, I think this is probably the fulcrum on which the book, like, the first half is stronger than the second half. The second half is still great. There's still great stuff coming up.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, the Storm chapter is probably the fulcrum on which the book turns to being a long form work rather than a collection of amazing short stories.
Right.
So we're moving on after that to the house. Because her family, her house was destroyed by this hurricane, and she has to move into one of these row houses. And the row houses are not touched by the hurricane.
Yes.
They are immutable. And everybody in her family starts developing these blisters that are super scary because they end up turning into these little like horns.
Yeah.
Like these little spikes, these spirally spikes.
It's what these remind me of, and I don't mean to make light of anybody who has this, but like when I was in high school or middle school and they showed us pictures of STDs, like the weird little HPV
Are you gonna
growths.
say a dick?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no, like those like those
I don't
dicks.
make light of anybody who has one.
Oh
but...
man, but you remember these dicks people have?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see what all the fuss is about.
I wasn't trying to imply that you don't have a dick. I just thought that'd be a funny swerve for you. This horn thing reminding you of that.
Yeah, man. Everybody seems to be so crazy about these dicks, but I don't get it.
Well aware of your proboscis.
but no, like when you see pictures of anybody who has like an HPV infection, like the kind of the weird calcified growths that kind of come out of it, and obviously that's unchecked, and not everybody who has that manifested that way, but like this kind of hit the same note for me. Yeah,
or like it also looks like vegetable growth. Like I feel like when you go to the grocery store and you go to the produce section, there's some vegetable that looks like this. Like a lot of the things that are happening here look like that weird kind of unchecked and chaotic growth that comes with fruit, or vegetables.
Well, you're unnerved by plants in general.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. It's all about everybody turning into plants, right? And it's just happening where they touch the floor too.
Yeah.
Which I really love that detail.
It's like on their feet or on their back if they're sleeping. Like they're just in absolute poverty because there's no other place they can go.
Yep. So the landlord has been spying on them. Their landlord, who also has a grandmother there who's covered head to toe, is kind of like a ragdamalion, tatterdamalion. And eventually the landlord who's been spying on Curie through here, being a kind of a creeper, busts through the wall, and he's covered head to toe with these things.
Yes.
Kind of taken to their illogical extreme.
Yeah, like he looks like an omnicorn. I mean, he doesn't just have the one horn. It is every square inch of his body is just exploding with these keratinous growths.
It reminds me of like a Resident Evil monster a little bit.
Yes,
it's not quite as like gooey and like.
I mean, specifically like the Iron Maidens from 4.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. But eventually, he the wind blows a stake through his neck in some real like Deus Ex, wind.
Deus Ex Gustina. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to the chapter where everyone decides to finally leave, which they should be doing.
Which they should have done, but can't.
Yeah, but now it's like people actually try to.
Yeah.
And this is pretty cool and pretty weird.
Yeah, so like this is the abrupt tone shift that I wanted. I wouldn't have wanted to lose the house chapter, but there's a time skip here, and we shift perspective. Like most of this has been through Curie or people around her, or around her, but there's a news crew that is coming in, and some time has passed, and nobody who comes to this town is able to ever never returns. Essentially, like
Yeah.
this is this island. It's a black hole from which nothing can escape.
Yes. And the news reporter is separated from her team, and she's being attacked by these kids who we're gonna come to know and love, who are using the weird like this property of the town now, where if anything moves quickly, if air moves quickly at all, it creates a whirlwind.
Yeah.
So these kids can kind of create these whirlwinds like little X-Men's.
Yes. And like everybody is an aeromancer now.
Yes, they're all airbenders. and any sudden movement will do this, any voice above a whisper, anything like that. And the newscaster eventually finds all the survivors who are holed up in these houses that won't blow down.
Right. These row houses specifically, these ones that nobody really noticed before, but now they are kind of the only things, on the skyline, because everything else is gone and just kind of continuously being repulverized to rubble by the hurricanes and by these by these kids that are going around. The way you described that actually unlocked it for me. Like, I love the idea of like nary a sound to be heard except for like the cracks of these kids, like being able to hear them from miles away.
And the a detail that we missed is that the news reporter actually unties the kids.
Oh, yeah.
She finds them tied up, and you think that like, oh, something creepy is happening, but they were tied up for safety. And when she eventually gets to the row house, they're like, you untied them? What the fuck? Like,
yeah, I guess I didn't take a note of that.
This is the Butterfly Gang. And the Butterfly Gang fucked shit up by riding around on whirlwinds in another like anime as hell little detail that snuck it into this thing.
Yeah.
Like kids who control the wind and ride around on tornadoes. This pretty kind of dumb anime stuff, but
they're
it's
like
surrounded by cool shit.
And when it is surrounded by cool shit, like, and when they throw these whirlwinds, it's like they're throwing kamehamehas. Like they're just throwing Dragon Ball beams, really, and destroying whatever they want.
Yep. And finally, at the end, Shuichi's like, maybe the town is destroying itself to turn into a spiral.
Maybe the town is a character. You ever thought of that?
Maybe spirals have something to do with it. So good job, Shuichi. So this is now like we're in the post-apocalyptic half of this story, where it's like it's just about this town that has this condition, and not so much like a monster of the week. Like we're fully in plot terms. So the titles have kind of less to do with individual things. So moving to the next chapter, which is chaos.
Yes. So there are all these kind of like societal changes. Like we're looking at the way that this culture is adapting to these inclement conditions, and also things that are there's happening in individuals. So slow people are turning into snails. Like Shuichi surmises, like, oh, anybody who doesn't move as fast as the town wants is transformed in this way. Whereas these kids who are starving because no aid is coming in are starting to steal food. In order to survive. So they're turning to this life of wind crime.
Yes, yeah, they solve wind crimes or cause wind crimes. So we need the wind detective to show up. And like the idea of them turning into snails when they move too slow is really great, because like you're encouraged not to move quickly, obviously, because it causes these whirlwinds that are super dangerous.
Oh my gosh! So if you're not a servant of the town, then it punishes you. Yeah.
Like it's if you're not, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Not just because there's no food. Eventually, this man finds a map of the town in this beam that breaks through this hole in this row house, this ancient row house that's always been here, and finds that it's a spiral. Yeah. The Curious family ends up getting kicked out, and they kind of wander the wasteland that was once this town until they find the gang, and they've been finding snail people and eating them.
Yep.
And that's great and really creepy.
Oh my gosh, like just immediately they justify it. They say, well, they're not really people anymore, are they? So, man's got to eat. So
the art on this, where they're like roasting the shells and then they pull out the kind of like, you can still see the skull inside the suggestion of a skull in like the snail meat.
Yep.
Is goddamn terrifying.
It really is. And what's funny is like, if you pay close attention, you'll notice they never really show anybody eating the flesh. Like they don't. There's never really a shot of somebody like mowing down.
There is.
Oh,
there's a guy who cuts it with a knife and fork, and there's him taking a bite with a big gulp sound effect.
Oh, well, you're looking at it. I remember it being like very squeamish about showing it, but if you're looking at it, then that's the thing. I mean, like it doesn't relish in this act of cannibalism. Then
it doesn't relish in it.
Yeah.
It's definitely showing it, but it's not. You're right in that. I know what you're getting at. Like it's not it's not the point. It's just kind of this creepy side detail more than anything.
Yeah, and so just this idea that like, well, now there's an extra danger aside from losing your humanity. You are kind of at the whim of people who have also lost theirs in a different way.
Yep. And they try to leave, but the gang, the tunnel out of town stops them from leaving, and then the gang attacks, who are the ones who are eating the snail. And you get the sense like, you think you're better than me? Like, you don't want to eat. You don't want to eat John? Yeah. Well, here.
It's like it's like how gangs would try to like out a narc. Like, come on, man, are you cool?
You take a hit of Escar Greg here, like
Escar Godot.
Yeah. Hawkeye escargot. There's a tie-in. But yeah, it does feel like, it's like, well, if a cop doesn't take the hit of dude, that means that you're a cop.
Take a hit of dude.
So the gang attacks. However, they get sucked into a lake by a whirlwind, which confused me because it's like, is the town like that? Seemed like a property of the town that did that, and it's like hard to see whose side the town is on. Like,
so I mean, the idea that it's goofy that the hurricanes chase after Kiri and speak her name. It's goofy that the town seems to be interested in protecting her. Like, yeah. That is explicitly one of the goofiest things about the plot to me.
Yeah,
is that like, she, like the town almost is saying, I need somebody to be a witness to this, and it has to be you, and and Shuichi.
Yeah, which is like, it's not like I would have been necessarily happier if at the end, a ghost explained that. Mm-hmm. I don't need that necessarily spelled out. It just, in the moment, it's kind of weird what ends up happening. Like, I was expecting it to be explicitly Lovecraftian, where it was ancestral.
Yeah,
I was expecting it to be like, like she finds her family tree and she's descended from the founder of the town or something like that. I would have been fine with that. Like
she gets to the core of this and she sees that like all the people like etched into the center are like they look like her. Like she, her mom and dad are there, and then
that's what I was expecting. Yeah. Did not happen.
Nope.
So moving into erosion. So people can't leave. If by land, you're actually turning in circles and you end up like walking forever and going back to where you came from. If you try to go in the tunnel, it just spirals infinitely. And by sea, your boats get sucked into whirlpools.
Yep. So there is no escape. They don't explain air, but I imagine tornadoes.
Yes. And they'd have to have a plane.
Right.
Just hanging out.
Yeah. So the people who are kind of cramming into this row house, we mentioned kind of offhandedly that Kiri's family has been kicked out. They were kicked out because it was so crowded, right? Like, you're not fitting in, you're causing too much trouble. More people have been cramming into these for safety, and again, because Ito thinks that people are made of silly putty under the right conditions, they're starting to turn into granfalloons. Like, inside of these row houses are writhing masses of limbs and flesh, just cramming more in and trying to maximize space.
Yep. And it's amazing. As this happens, eventually they bust out of the house, and it uses the sound effect crick crick, which I appreciate.
Yep, I tweeted a picture of that.
Yeah, crick crick. Also, is this the point where her brother starts developing spiral back?
That is at the end of the next chapter.
Oh, gotcha.
Or no, at the end of this chapter.
Yeah. So they run into a group of people who have a friend who is a snail, who they're just keeping around as like
emergency meat. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's like potted friend.
They keep Greg around like I keep a granola bar on my backpack.
It is nasty. Yeah. Everybody, everybody's eating snail now.
Yeah, like it is just like, well, this is what we're drawn to, and then these skull imprints just start showing up on people. Like it's marking people who have decided to make this, who have decided to indulge in that.
Yes, yeah, and also Kiri's mom blows away like her dad did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and brother's got a case of shell. It's coming up. So Kiri decides to escape because if her brother doesn't get away from here, he's going to turn to a snail person, and that's a bad scene.
Right. So she still has some measure of hope, and Shuichi is kind of along for the ride with her. And as they're going out of town, not only do sirens start blaring, but also they notice that from this high vantage point that all of the row houses are kind of arranged in such a way that they could be joined together into a spiral. And in fact, they see the people of the town, people who are not granfalloons, right, are starting to build out and extend the row house so that they can, nominally find more protection, but they are all existing to serve the force that is at the very center of this.
Yes. Yep. So she's trying to escape. Eventually, these cannibals, the people who kept her on the emergency meet, catch up as her brother starts turning and ultimately does.
Yeah.
Like ends up happening.
There's a great moment where he bursts an eye stalk and then she pushes it back in.
Oh. And just the placid expression on the brother's face as all this stuff's happening. Like he's not smiling quite, but he's almost smiling.
I can picture, so they still have their mouths. I can kind of picture them like just like a goldfish opening and closing their mouths very slowly.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Man, oh man, but she's like, go, be free. And she sends him down a cliffside as they come after her, and they succumb to their spiralitis before they're able to do any harm.
At one point, one of the guys ends up eating one of his friends, who's not the brother, and he does it by crawling into the shell.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really creepy, and he's just like, there's just all these like slurping and munching sound effects. And the rest of the people are like, don't eat all of it, save some for us.
Yeah.
And that's when they escape, is because this group of cannibals is doing that, and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. They come back and their eyes are changed. They're all bloodshot and everything. And they're talking about like, hey, we have to get to your brother. And when they do it, they're like, man, when I was inside that shell, it felt so good.
Yeah. And there's an explicit connection here, again, to Bloodborne, the snail ladies in the fishing village. Right. Yeah. When we see their spiral shells and we see them outside of it, like as these bodies are leaving the shells, they kind of taper off to this slug-like end.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, again, ding, we're going to find these connections to justify us talking about this cool thing. Yes. Gary, in the experience, I was kind of like, yeah, get on with it. I think this is all good stuff. Like erosion and escape are both really good.
It's when you say when you're into it, you're like, yeah. And then in retrospect, it's good. That speaks to a pacing problem.
Yes, it
right?
does.
Like, it just means like it's yes, on paper, the list of things that happen is good.
Yeah.
But the pace has slowed considerably.
Yeah.
Because the beginning of it is so snappy. Like, because you're introduced to a new idea constantly. Here, like the new ideas are really just like eating snail people, which we've had that idea for a while. And then just kind of these characters, which I am invested in. But it's just like it's the same amount of like page space.
Yeah. So
just the pacing slows down instead of increases is what you expect.
Yeah.
Right. Like oh my God, the book is a spiral. It starts in short concentric circles, and then eventually gets to slow, languid circles at the end.
Yeah, it's funny. So the creation of new ideas is more interesting than the way they're ultimately kind of reassembled to tie everything back together, which is what's happening here. We see the snail people, we see humans just kind of turning into spirals at will to serve their purposes. We see the general kind of decay that is brought about by all of these things, just factors stacking on top of each other.
Yeah. It's also just like the things aren't really being done new with the ideas. Like they're being reassembled, but not there aren't new angles on them so much.
I suppose that's what I mean. It is just let's combine these in different ways.
Oh no, I wasn't trying to correct you. I just meant like just restating it because I agree. So the kids they actually get out and they return like years later, and they why? And they see the row house.
Because time moves faster at the center of the circle. Like they have been accelerating. Who knows what time it is on the outside? But as they're in the slow, languid part of it at the outer, things that are in closer because relativity. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. I would have just I don't know anything. I would have shot myself in the face. I don't need to see how the spiral people live. Like I'm okay.
Well, they don't go back intentionally. Like they reach the edge and they spiral back in.
That's the part I forgot.
Yeah.
So they get there and the row houses have been turned into a spiral.
Yes.
And there's a leader who's building onto it, and he's just kind of building onto the spiral and building onto it. And says her parents are still alive. They actually made it, and they're at the center of the spiral in the lake. Yeah.
And so Shuichi, again, throwing out his hypotheses, he says that this is how the town has always been, right? They found that map earlier. Like, this is obviously, like, a way that it used to be. The row houses are old. They're a remnant of something else. Maybe they've always been here. And this exists in a constant cycle of destruction and renewal.
Yes. Yeah. So they move through this like kind of half-built labyrinth of houses, and when people die as these kind of like gross spirally creatures, they just get thrown out into the street because they start to stink. So there's this like, that's one of those things I love about horror too, is these like nods to civility or culture at well after the point, like the sell by date of civility. Like, it's not, they're not doing it because it's be civil or drink it because it smells bad, but like there's still part of them that still understands like, oh, we don't want to live with a corpse.
Yeah, like
like it's okay that I have no bones, but it's not okay that a corpse is next to me.
Yeah, they don't recognize that they're monsters yet.
Yeah, I love that.
And
that's one of my favorite like tropes.
They never acknowledge it. They're all just trying to work to meet a goal. And so we're making these like symbolic declarations about what we're seeing in this. As far as I can tell, there's no greater moral.
No, I have no. That's part of the reason why I feel like it's kind of unsatisfying in the end when we get there. Is that, like I don't know what the idea is, and this thing doesn't have to have a point necessarily to be good. Like it's still a wonderful journey. It's just it doesn't feel like it has like a thesis or anything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think I'm picking up on when I was talking about kind of vague dissatisfaction with the ending. So the labyrinth ends up kind of coming complete, and they travel down. This is where the lake was, and they travel down the spiral staircase that goes on forever. I
just love the idea of the row house shitting out this mass of people.
Yeah,
like they are so it is complete as leading into the center. There is no longer a lake. There is just a spiral staircase and just this massive spiral of flesh just sluicing out like down into whatever is below.
Yep. Yeah. And as they're going down, so we're in the chapter completion. As they are continuing down, a body that's been out here actually bites Kiri's leg.
Yeah, it's like, hey, take me with you. Like,
exactly.
It has been left behind, and because it is one of these snail people, it has no way to kind of proceed on its own. It's like, hey, take me to my salvation where everybody else has gone.
Yes. Yeah. And because of this, Shuichi falls trying to wrestle this guy off and falls down the middle of this thing. So she continues down as the staircase kind of inverts into a screw.
I love
and she
this.
eventually falls as well.
That inflection point where it turns into a screw, like this immediately was like, yes, this is another step up of surreal. And it's part of why I like this, like the way this closes, at least visually. Like it is so visually arresting and surreal because she falls into what might as well be the sunken city of Rillier. Just where all of this, where all of these, spiral bodies have gone, and are assembling into this alien subterranean landscape of, kind of like towers beneath the earth. And as she goes along, she's noticing that the older bodies, the ones who are not so much flesh, everybody kind of looks blissed out because they've reached their purpose. But B, the older bodies are kind of like ossified and turning into stone. And so like something is being assembled here. It's never explained what. And like, if you think too hard about it, it is going to be like, well, that's kind of dumb. But like visually, as you look at these, like this is obviously another world that they've gone into and can't get away from.
Yeah, it looks great. Like the actual geometry and everything here looks really, really cool. She eventually meets up with Shuichi, and they just like give up.
Yeah,
essentially,
like, he can't get out. His legs are broken because of the fall.
Yep.
And as opposed to leaving him there, again, there's a nice symmetry here. He wouldn't abandon Kiri because he loved her. She won't abandon him. So they decide to assume their ultimate fate.
Yep, which is to spiral together like the two fuck snakes that we mentioned earlier, and then that's really it. And it just says something like the spiral will eventually awaken.
Yes, the eternal spiral will awaken, and we see them together in this very moment, like at the center of the spiral. As we've seen time dilate and expand and contract, at the center it all stands still, and it will be like this. They will be together forever, as the town rebuilds and is destroyed around them, and the city is built into. Yeah. And then there's a lost chapter that's like not very good at the end. Like I don't even really like. I don't know. I glossed over this. Like I was already like just a little bit like this was a really long thing, and a lost chapter might have been lost for a reason, as is often the case with things. So I'm not super into galaxies. Yeah,
but we should probably chat about it.
People start spotting new galaxies. They get telepathy as they start popping up. There's an astronomer who is very jealous of the fact that people are making these discoveries. Kind of like hopping onto his steez, and his head explodes into a new galaxy because of the knowledge.
Yes,
and that is
which all sounds cool on paper.
That is a Bloodborne connection. Ding.
Yes. Yep. But it's just not. It just doesn't like part of it's like visually, like it just doesn't look that cool. And a galaxy is missing if you make a big list of things that can spiral, right? Like that could have been in there, but it just, you know, so it had to be checked off the list.
When I looked at the chapter list and I saw galaxy at the end, I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to be the cosmic justification for this?
Or that it moved into space, right? Like we infected the stars with this, and then it's going to be like aliens dealing with this or something stupid like that, or just something. But it's just not there. Yeah, and then that ends up being Uzumaki, which like it sounded. I don't want anyone who's listening to this to think that I'm like down on it, because I'm totally not. Like I love it. I love it. It's great. It's just I think it is that lack of like a perspective that I'm picking up on that like just makes it the ending, other than visually, just kind of feel like, well, what if some bad things happened to some people and they accepted it?
Yeah.
You know, which is fine. Like that's not a terrible perspective for something to have. It's just not my favorite kind of thing.
I'm dogged about my assertion that a bad ending rarely affects the quality of the overall work. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of more willing to accept this as a masterwork on the whole, because it is a hell of a journey. Like, you know, I can't decide if I wish that there was a moral, and I don't even know, like there may be something that I'm not seeing because of my cultural ignorance. Like I'm willing to admit that there's possibly something there, but in none of the research that I did I find that there was kind of a greater meaning around this, aside from just, you know, Junji Ito, who is obviously a very visually focused person, being fascinated by the symbol and wanting to make as, you know, explore it as thoroughly as possible in the mode that he is kind of most accustomed to. Like, let's find some horror in, like, you know, bodies and in everyday situation set against this otherwise common thing.
This visual theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on that level, it's 100% a success. Like when you say, I know you weren't setting up this, but to clarify for people who are listening, like when you say that you are avowed in your statement that like an ending doesn't ruin a work, I don't think it ruins a work in this case at all either. But I won't go as far as to say that an ending doesn't have any effect or can't have an effect. I think that's too far. You know, and I think you said that before. I think is that a video game hot dog thing? I feel like that was a conversation those guys had, and there's like it's part of that longer conversation I'm missing.
No, it's definitely popped up there, but it's something that I've felt for a while, especially like, let's say since I started reading a lot of Stephen King, like in college. Just kind of like, I really don't think that is a thing. Like them saying that set that off, but I've never really been that put off by a bad ending to a thing.
Yeah, I don't think it, like, I think I'm probably perhaps somewhere in the middle, where I think that like it doesn't, to my mind, like it's crazy to say that an ending isn't part of the work or can't affect it.
Yeah,
you know, like
it's not a different thing. Yeah,
it's not a different thing, and it's part of the thing, right? So if it's weak, then part of the thing that you love is weak. You know, it just exists alongside really strong stuff. You know, and I think that in my mind, that's where Uzumaki lands, where it's like the stuff it does, I haven't seen done anywhere else, and is 100% remarkable. Like it's wonderful. I just like it does it. I can't call it perfect. Like it's great. It's mandatory. You know, it's like I feel like if anybody who is, if this is at all interesting, like for the love of God, hunt this down. It's so good. It's just like I can't say I wasn't disappointed. It didn't ruin it for me, but I did have a feeling of like, oh, that's a bad note to end this on.
Yeah. And this will sound like a platitude, but like I very rarely call something perfect. Like I think one of the only perfect things we've ever covered for the show is Shadow of the Colossus. And even that has some very glaring flaws. You know, like it's you know, like I'm not making the, you know, the most extreme version of the stance. I just think that in my own personal estimation, like I'm resistant to the idea that like a bad a bad resolution to a thing, you know, season 2 of Twin Peaks doesn't make season 1 of Twin Peaks worse, even if holistically all, you know, like you can't call it an unmitigated win because season 2 exists.
In my mind, it doesn't make season 1 worse, but it does make like the whole like a little bit less satisfying. Like with Twin Peaks specifically, Twin Peaks specifically, like I would have liked to have seen a stronger, like kind of the second half to that, because I like the first half and it would have made a whole work. You know, like I think that there is something to a whole work that is powerful, and that's why like something like Shadow Colossus, which like I guess maybe I'm more willing to forgive bumps on the way to something that feels complete. Than I am something that has no bumps on the way to feeling incomplete. You know, and that's what this feels like. It has no bumps on the way to feeling incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's like, I like a complete thing. Like I like a Shadow of the Colossus, you know, where it's like, oh man, does that stick everything it's trying to do? Like everything it tries, it's, the way there is not always perfect. Like there's a couple of annoying things. There are not very many of them. But it, like the ending of that is such a good payoff that it does make the lead up, like they reflect on each other.
Yeah.
It's not a vacuum, at least in my mind. Like,
and neither am I. I just think it's, we place different values on things. And, I don't want us to get lost in a sea of, subjectivity. However, it's something that, we run into from time to time. We value different things. And, I don't want anybody to think that like either of us is making an official declaration about like what Bonfireside Chat stance is on this. Like neither of us are correcting each other when we say like, oh, this thing totally works or doesn't.
And it would be a dumb place if we're trying to make that stance. This would be a dumb place to do it over something we both really love. Like,
right.
This is like some of the least we've ever disagreed about something. It's cloaked. It's like dressed up as something we disagree in. Yeah. I think what it is it's just a really good illustration of that very fine difference of articulation of that opinion, right? Like this is just a work, like that is something that where you and I differ, and this is a laser focused great example of like the least offensive something could be while hitting, because it's a very small line between us, and this just lands on it.
Yeah, the Uzumaki is the work that isolates this particular variable that like in our difference as it relates to the discussion. Yes,
and I think that's more what I'm picking up on, and that's why I'm harping on it, because it's good to capitalize on something that is such a good example of that. Yeah. So when you go online, you take the online quiz, like are you a Kole or are you a Gary? It's really going to like, do you feel like the ending of Uzumaki makes it as a whole like a little bit worse, or do you think that it doesn't matter?
Right.
And then that will shunt you into one of two different categories. If you choose the Gary side, you can come stay with me. Come live in my mildewy basement with the walk-in furnace. And if you choose the Kole side, you can go live with Kole and take baths in his bird bath and sleep in his crawl space. So those are your options.
Well, it's more of an attic like hobbit hole above the entryway.
There are two kinds of people in this world. You can choose.
Are you a basement dweller or an attic dweller? Like,
exactly. So moving on, we're covering it may seem like this is already a long episode, but we're covering something else.
Oh yeah.
And this is the Shadow Over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. This is a novella originally published in 1936.
Yes, that H.P. Lovecraft himself hated very much so.
Something you can learn about Lovecraft when you start figuring out like what he liked and didn't like was that he had no idea what he did was good or what wasn't. Like he loves the color out of space, and like boy do I love the color out of space. But like he didn't like this. He thought like Call of Cthulhu was just fine. Like he does not like his work that other people like. Yeah, which is kind of refreshing as a creative person, because I think that happens a lot with everybody who makes stuff. Oh yeah. Like what you think is your best work is rarely what other people think is your best work. But it ended up getting published because August Derleth, the weird villain in the Lovecraft mythos in some ways and hero in other ways, submitted it to Weird Tales in secret.
Yes, and a hero in this way by like just kind of like taking this thing like it was baby Superman and sending it out. Yes, so it could escape H.P. Lovecraft's furnace. Yes, and it was rejected, but kind of eventually here it was resurrected, not as a serial, but actually as a hardcover book, like the only one that was actually published in Lovecraft's lifetime. Yeah.
And this is a hugely, not just with Bloodborne, because there is a big part of the fishing village that is straight up Shadow Over Innsmouth, but as far as Lovecraft works that have been explicitly kind of adapted, this one's up there, right? Yes. Like there are ideas from this and specific. This is a big part of Dark Corners of the Earth. This kind of tropes and the things that are involved in this show up a lot in other kinds of pop culture.
Yes. And like, so it extends into Bloodborne, like taking the focus back in. It's not just the fishing village. I see a little bit of like just Bloodborne as a whole, like something about a tainting of the blood, transforming people and ruining a place.
Yes. Making like a pact
Yes.
Making a pact with, and this is an idea that shows up in Bloodborne, but also shows up in other kinds of fiction. It's one of my favorite things that ever happens in fiction is people turning away from religion to things that are darker, but the reason why they do is because they work.
Yeah.
Like this idea that like, oh, like I can keep praying to regular God, but regular God is it's everywhere and it's ambient and all these things. Or over here's Dark Dad. And if I pray to Dark Dad, I literally just get golden fish. Like, and just the idea of like, and there's all these kind of weird shades. Like it reminds me of like Germany on the cusp of World War II, where like economically it was so in the shitter that like it's just easy for anyone to just show up and be like, hey, why don't we try this? Because people are willing to try anything.
Yeah.
And that's what happens here. So let's get into it.
Yes, let's get into it. So we have this narrator, like a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stories. This has been narrated, kind of not posthumously, but kind of in media res later on as this Robert Olmsted, as we learn he is named from the notes,
like the opposite of media res.
Yeah, I suppose after
yes.
everything. Yeah, yes. But he's writing this before the final decision he has to make. Right.
Yes. Yeah. So there is action. We don't know what the action is. It's a log.
Yes.
And he's recalling the events that took place on July 16th, 1927, to help him come to terms with this horrible step that waits ahead of him. But we don't know what it is yet.
Right. And so he's talking after the fact about this horrible series of events that took place in this northeastern town called Innsmouth, which is based on, oh my gosh, Hertfordshire, New Hampshire, I think.
Something like that. There are a couple of different ideas. Behind where it could be named, but that's definitely one of them.
Yes.
But it's fictional. It's but it's a seaside town.
Yes. And he says, you may have heard about this town because of some action that the government took against it. That has kind of been associated with the war on liquor, right? This was, towards the tail end of Prohibition. And that's how it was, kind of like swept under the rug. And his retelling of this is A, to remind himself that this was not a hallucination, and B, to help him kind of understand, kind of like what went on, like to put this in the greater context and to reveal the secrets behind this, and that was like maybe a headline one day and then gone the next.
Yes. Yeah, and it kind of hints that there's something more to it. So he's kind of like an odd bookie fellow, and he has been he's traveling
from Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah,
Go Rockets!
Yeah. So he's looking up the East Coast, looking for antiques and kind of interested in old architecture and stuff. And he's a cheap dude. He's a frugal dude, and he eventually learns that there's a cheap bus to Arkham that runs through Innsmouth.
Yes.
But he's also interested in Innsmouth.
Yes.
Right? Like he goes to the historical society. He's like, hey, if I'm on my way, I might as well go and look at some gambrel roofs. Like, boy, does Lovecraft love his gambrel roofs. Like,
what does he love? Well, what's a gambrel roof, Gary?
It's like a barn roof. Like it's a roof that has a point of articulation halfway through.
Okay, there we go. I thought it was like a name, like Gambrel Ruth.
Oh, no. That's the lady who lives up on my roof who won't shut the fuck up.
Gambrel Ruth roof? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so sad those fell out of favor with architects because they all went mad because they're sensitive. No, but like he is kind of drawn to this, A, for reasons we're going to find out, but B, because like they say, well, you could take this bus there, but we don't like the folk from around them parts.
Yeah, there's this weird sense of like kind of racism to it, and he kind of investigates the town in this first chapter when we learn about this, because they don't want to. They've got something called the Innsmouth look to them. They have this Innsmouth blood, and the first person he's talking to has kind of an open mind. He's like, oh, it's just race prejudice. They just don't like these people who have these kind of narrow heads and bulgy eyes, and their skin isn't right. Yeah. He calls them white trash, which is like a weird modern word to show up in this 1930s story.
That's why I highlighted it on my Kindle. And again, kind of looking back at this, we talked about this for a while, but H.P. Lovecraft's hatred knew no bounds, and also it was classism as well.
Yes, indeed. Even though he was very like poor, it was like that weird. It's kind of it's
he was
a
poor,
weird
but he was from good blood.
Exactly, that's what it was. He was. That's the weird kind of shadowing or other take on the Row House stuff from Uzumaki.
He was a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. Yeah.
Yes, and remained so until he died
of stomach cancer because he wouldn't eat. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
not to make light of stomach cancer, that is a horrible disease. Covering our bases.
Well, even I don't even want to make light of Lovecraft dying. We talked about that a lot in our Lovecraft
we did.
episode. But I have a lot of sympathy for that guy.
No, yeah, we're using that as a humorous device.
Wait, so yeah, it's just silly for him to be arrogant about anything.
Right.
Like, he did not learn any kind of humility in that. Even though he's very humble about his writing, he's still, and boy, that's an interesting psychological angle where he's like clinging on to these inherent truths about himself when all of the transient truths have kind of faded away. And that probably there's a lot of the kind of psychology of his racism there, like him grasping on to things that are inherent about a person that time and tide can't affect.
Like it's such like a Protestant or what's the word that I'm thinking of? Not pilgrim, but
puritanical.
Puritanical like determinism. Like it's almost like a biological Calvinism.
Yeah.
And that is shown in this work, right? A single drop of this thing about you that you had no control over affects your entire future, whether for good or for ill. And he was kind of like holding himself up against that.
Yeah, like him just like, I still have this inherent quality in me no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Because this thing exists because it has to exist or otherwise I'm trash.
Right.
And that's a sympathetic kind of idea to me, I guess.
Yeah.
This town is based on
any kind of insecurity is going to have like a little bit of like, I'm going to have a little bit of sympathy for that.
For sure. For sure. And like just kind of fiercely believing something that is maybe not true because otherwise you go crazy. Which is the opposite of a story is where you fiercely believe something that is true. And then you do go crazy. So this town is kind of run by this guy named Marsh who runs this refinery in town, but he has not been seen in years because he has some kind of deformity.
Right.
And there's this gold that's coming through this gold refinery, but nobody really knows where the gold initially comes from. It's refined here, but we don't know where it comes from, and people think it's maybe coming from the sea, from pirates.
Yes, like just from a ring that is run through there, right? Like this could be some kind of den of iniquity. And kind of along with that, like it gets a little bit eerier because it extends to the animal kingdom, because this area was once overfished, but all of a sudden they were overrun with them, and that is also an export, and that kind of characterizes the entire town down to the very smell of it.
Yes. There's this rock formation off the coast called Devil's Reef, and there's this legend that these terrible creatures live there. And as one of the things he's doing when he's investigating the town is he goes to a university and sees some Innsmouth jewelry. And there's this strange pale tiara, and this gold actually has this weird white quality. It's this whitish gold. I just imagine being that kind of like ivory luminescent kind of quality to it. Yeah. And also this relief that has these terrible amphibious fishmen that I'm sure won't show up.
I picture the white gold being like one of those Electrum class rings you would get because your family was not one of the Soches. Like you weren't really
sure.
It's kind of like, well, I've got to have a class ring, but you might as well have the premium platinum plus faux gold.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take something made out of Electrum because D&D second edition, man.
I know, right? And it's weird how many minerals and weapons I know the names of because of D&D.
100%, man. Weapons. That's crazy. The arms and equipment guy taught me everything I know about
falchions.
Yeah, about falchions. Everything I knew about halberds. I forgot to ask. So in all the churches, there aren't kind of conventional churches. They've all been chased out and replaced with this pagan order called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
Which, good way, good job cloaking that, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, there were, like, this was kind of a thing more in that time. These kind of like esoteric orders and things like that. Like, the way that like Shriners used to have real power. or like Freemasons.
Specifically Freemasonry or the Knights of Columbus or whatever, where like just the conspiracy theories around those. And, I can totally see that.
Like now they're home to the fish fry. Right, like these terrible cults and things that used to have these names are now just home of like the all-you-can-eat cod.
Well, you get drunk, you get drunk and play ping pong. Yeah,
exactly. Like that's where they're getting all that cod from. Literally all you can eat. They must have made a dark pact.
To be honest, all the cod that I can eat is very little. I don't really like cod. Yeah.
Did you just real quick? I mean, I know we're running long. This will be quick. Did you read that thing where the guy or the Rock posted his diet? And a guy wrote a very funny like live reaction to reading it. So the Rock's diet involves like so many goddamn ounces of cod.
Really?
He's cod for every meal. So much cod, and like the guy who's writing, he was like, how many ounces of cod is in a cod? How many cods are you eating, dude? He just eats so many cods. It's really incredible. It's like all he eats is like cod, rice, and vegetables,
which makes a degree of sense. It is lean protein, but I find it to be flavorless. I'd rather have haddock. Is my preferred fish of choice, but.
If I'm going to eat something that's fried, I'll do fried cod because I'm just going to put lemon juice and dip in tartar sauce anyway. But anywho, let's go on to chapter 2.
Yes, chapter 2. So he has decided to take this bus into town, and he gets a firsthand look at the Innsmouth look. Right, this driver is obviously suffering from what he perceives to be some kind of horrible skin condition. My favorite detail of this is he talks about these yellow hairs that are sticking out of the back of his head, because obviously this guy used to be a blonde before he started changing, but like there's just these last couple strands of it holding on.
Yeah, and you could have just stopped there. Like he could have just been a blonde, and it would have grossed me out. Like,
wow, a strong stance about hair color.
Yeah, like those towheads get on my country.
We would not have gotten along as kids.
And as he's subjected to this horrible blonde hair, he kind of looks out his window and sees the layout of Innsmouth, which we're gonna pass over this real quick. But
yep.
In terms of words, it's a lot.
Yes,
so like
both
Lovecraft liked his architecture.
He really liked his architecture. He also liked his city planning.
Yes,
he totally liked this, and like a chapter that otherwise would be incredibly tense is mostly dedicated to street relationships. I
think the 10th chapter works, and I think that this relates to that. Like I think that him planning out the town, like having that real kind of D&D map version of the town is necessary. For that last version, or makes it better. Like it makes sense for him to know where to go to have paid this much attention to it. Like I think it pays off, but I mean mileage can definitely vary on that. I don't think it's an unqualified win.
I think that there are just way too many page inches dedicated to it.
I mean, I probably wouldn't argue with that. Like it's a quirk of the writing. Like he's into that, and at least like the character's into it too. Like not that makes it a better thing to put in the story, but it's like it at least isn't weird that the character's noting it. Yeah, that's why he's going here.
Yeah, at least right now, like it's like, oh, this is a curiosity, and he is noting the just kind of the peculiar aspect to everything that he sees.
Yeah. And there's this odor, there's this pervading stink of fish, which happens if you've ever been in like a coastal, like a seaside town. There's this weird underlying stink, but here it is way worse. It's
so funny when they're like when that is a thing about a town. One of my strongest memories of being a kid, Wapakoneta, Ohio. It's a place in northwestern Ohio where Neil Armstrong grew up. America's first moon man, and supposedly, it's a pig farming town. My family went there because there is the Neil Armstrong Museum, which is, I remember being really cool because you get to see all of this astronaut stuff. There are cool movies. There's like a planetarium kind of thing, really cool. But like the trip was ruined because in a pig farming town, it is surrounded by lagoons of pig shit.
Yes,
and so like.
It is.
I'm on a vacation with my family, and I want to see space stuff and swim in the pool at the hotel, and we can't be outside because of because of just the horrible smell of pig shit.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm smelling when I hear about this.
Yeah, I think about that too, and it just is kind of like, or if you have a town where like there's like a tannery, right, or something like that,
like a paper mill,
Yeah, like that's just it for your town. Like might as well move. It's got cursed with the spiral. You might as well get out of there because there's a paper mill.
I'm happy that downtown Cincinnati is home to a bunch of breweries, because if you're out on a Saturday afternoon, it smells like bread.
Yeah, well, I'm like 6 blocks away from a bread factory, from like the Franz Bread Company.
Nice.
So it smells like bread often by my house, which is great. There's a river in Chicago that always smells like chocolate. Do like a chocolate factory, and it's pretty great.
Nice.
But this town stinks. And he sees these as he's looking out in the town square, he sees this kind of strange shadow peering from the door of the Esoteric Order of Dagon, and he's wearing this crown, and he's wearing this tiara that he's seen and kind of spooks him out.
Yeah, cuts a strange silhouette in the door, and as he looks around, that's not the only thing that unsettles him. Everybody has this Innsmouth look. They're all in kind of various stages of this, what seems to be a progressive disorder.
Yes. So he goes there. He hears about, there's this hotel, this terrible Gilman hotel here, in a subtle naming convention, and but he's on his way. He's looking around. He goes to the grocery store, and there's a young person there who it's actually staffed by somebody who is sent there from kind of corporate, which is a huge plot point in Dark Corners of the Earth.
I like the way they handle that there, actually.
Yeah,
like you're
going to investigate his death,
right?
Which is a super cool way to tie that in. But he talks about the kind of insular nature of the town. There's never any or you only see younger people. You never see anyone who's old. There are all these, lights on in the attic and boarded up windows and stuff.
The only old person that he talks about, and the only old person that you see is this nonagenarian, this Zadok Allen, who is kind of the town drunk. And he kind of points him like, yeah, if you want to learn more about the town, he's kind of the only person who's going to talk.
Yes.
Which I love that as like a ploy to sell expensive whiskey.
He really responds to this. like Squidly's choice.
I don't have that much of a barometer of how much liquor one should drink in an evening. But a quart probably is too much.
No, you're drinking to forget.
I suppose.
Yeah, I think he even says something about that. I even think he says like, if you've seen the things I've seen.
Yeah. I'm not judging Zadok. Like everybody's got their reasons, but like it's just that is a prodigious amount of alcohol to drink in one evening to me.
So it's one of Gamergate's greatest shitheads grabbed the Twitter tag Zadok Allen. So and he's got a picture and so like whenever I see him on Twitter, when we were in the throes of Gamergate, like you would see Zadok Allen, and I had a positive association with this character who I think is interesting, and just having to see him just spout nonsense. Yeah, it was a real bummer.
Yeah. But he leaves our narrator leaves the grocery store to tour the narrow, shadow blighted ways of Innsmouth. And he wonders whether or not the Innsmouth look is a disease or if it's a blood stain. And he uses that incredibly evocative phrase for it, as he notices that all of the attics and third story windows are tightly shuttered and bolted.
Yes, and we never actually see what's behind there, which is great because they're just suggestions. So moving on to chapter 3, which I think is pretty cool. We haven't really done the what we think is cool about this talk yet. So I'll just say a thing I think are cool, but I'm not speaking for you. So we can have this classic Mega Man Legends thing. If I say something is cool and you don't think it's cool, stop me. So in chapter 3, he eventually finds Zadok Allen and plies him with liquor, and this is the town drunk who tells him stories for the entire chapter. Yeah. And he's got you need to read this out loud. Yeah,
it's like a North Mid-Atlantic maritimer dialect to it. If you read it like a pirate, it kind of works.
Yeah. Or just listen to an audiobook of this. There's a really great BBC recording that you can find on YouTube of the entire thing, and they do wonders with this chapter. It's really great. The person who narrates it.
Nice.
So he tells the story essentially of the town, what happened. There's this Devil's Reef marsh, and he took this trip to the South Sea Islands, and when he returned he said they should get better gods, ones that will actually help.
We should trade ours in, because remember, this is in the middle of kind of this economic downturn, right?
Yes.
They have no food, they have no real industry to speak of, good.
And where I was going to say that, and the reason why is not unsympathetic. Part of it is they lost a lot of their best men and everything were drafted.
No, the draft is later.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah,
this is just the fish drying up.
Yeah, this is the fish drying up. This is just normal. Sometimes a town just dies.
Yes.
For no reason. The Civil War happens at a really interesting point in this.
Yeah. So he eventually keeps going to the South Seas and bringing back a whole bunch of gold.
Yeah.
And this island, what happens is they sacrifice their young to these deep ones in order to get gold and more plentiful fishing.
Yes. And eventually, just sacrificing their most able-bodied young men was not enough. So they had to start mating. And you get the idea that, okay, the first taste is free, but, we got to get a little bit of something on the side if we're going to keep on hooking you up with these rocks. So they decide to start mating, right? They have to make this arrangement to mate. And this is attractive because the deep ones tell them, okay, just hear us out here. Your children are going to live eternally, except they're going to be like fish people, but it doesn't matter. They're still going to know who they are and everything. They're just going to live out their days at the bottom of the sea serving Mother Hydra.
Yes. Which this detail, and I mean, every time we talk about Lovecraft, I'm not going to make this disclaimer. I'm not scared of miscegenation in real life.
Mm-hmm.
I am scared of having sex with a monster, though. Like this detail, like the idea of being born in this town where this thing is expected of me, and it's like it's so visceral, right? Like the kind of general fears that people have of sex that everyone kind of has of sex in this weird abstract. This triggers that for me, and like in a not to trivialize that word, but like this hits that point for me.
Yeah.
Really hard. Like the idea of being like, all right, well, son, this is what's going to happen. This is the way it's always happened. If you don't do this, we're going to fucking throw you into the ocean.
Yeah.
Here you get to make love, make love to Gilly. And,
so in its most beautiful form, and in its most like kind of like perfect and healthy form, it is a wonderful vulnerability, right? Where it is an act of sharing, but in the part of you that hasn't experienced it, that blows it way out of proportion. It is an act of vulnerability that might as well be being led to slaughter. And it is very, like this whole idea of like, it is an expectation that you are going to, do this, like this is a part of you now. This is just what we do. It adds a tremendous amount of like pressure and society on top of it. Like, have you lost your virginity to a fish woman yet? Come on, man.
Yeah.
We're going to make a pact by fish prom.
Yeah. At the end of the school year.
Yeah.
So
I got that. That was funny.
Oh, thank you. So and Obed, so I love this the story of Obed, where you have this idea of like he genuinely, like I get the sense that he genuinely cares about the town, and that there are these lines that he progressively ends up crossing, but he doesn't want to. So like he's like, let's do the same thing, but we're not gonna promise our kids to have fish sex, right? Like we're just gonna sacrifice people and get the gold, but it's gonna sacrifice one for the good of the many. We're gonna save the town.
Yeah.
But we're just not gonna do the fish bone. One, because they're an outdated band and nobody cares about them anymore, and two, because it's gross. So
right. And so they cross that one line and they are responded to with swift justice by the authorities, but in springing them out causes a massacre that was passed off as a plague to the outside world, right?
Yes.
Because so many people died. But eventually he caves. And I like the idea that like, all right, well, we're going to do this right. We're going to establish certain houses and certain lineages. Go in there and get her, champ.
Yep. And you got this as a pull quote, which I love. Like, certain houses would have to entertain guests. Shudder. Like just like, oh man, like imagining like it's just like there's never this visually presented, but I can just imagine, like a grim person with a oil lamp walking a figure that's covered in a cloak.
I always picture the cloaked figure on a leash for some reason. Like they're cogent, like they have a mind, but like I just picture it being dragged along.
Yeah. Because like maybe the deep ones don't like it either. Like maybe this is like a result of like nobody. It's a real Romeo and Juliet kind of thing.
It's like just think about it from the deep ones' perspective. Like maybe they don't care, but like what if this is a reminder of what they once were? Like we see at the end of this that like the process of transformation is also like shedding all of your attachment to to this old, frail, fragile form and going to serve a higher purpose. But like I can also like project my own like regret onto that. Like, don't look at me, I'm a monster.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So these these people, the babies will not die. They'll just go to the bottom of the ocean, hang out with Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, which is where the esoteric order of Dagon comes from. Yeah. And Zadok was involved up to a certain point,
but I guess 15 years old. Yeah.
Yes. Oh man. And like there are these oaths you take, and there's the third oath, which is like such an evocative. Like if you take the third oath of Dagon, like, well, but he refuses to do it. And ends up enlisting in the Civil War.
He would rather go and fight the South than plunge into the briny deep.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and then just like take a chance with battlefield medicine and stuff.
And he says like the things were better here during the draft because all the government men were around. But if I had any sense or bravery, I would have just never come back. Yep.
Yeah, but he does not.
Right.
He's an old toothless drunk. Obed takes a second wife, and nobody ever saw that person.
Right.
And the daughter from that marriage was shipped off to be educated in Europe.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. And the Zadok reveals his final secret here. He's kind of like, yeah, that sounds scary, right? Well, it's not what the Deep Ones have done. It's what they're planning to do. They have been bringing these things out of the sea. And then the best, great line in this book is like, stranger, You ever seen a Shoggoth? Like, and there's no explanation here what a Shoggoth is. Like, I know what a Shoggoth is, but there's nothing in this. It's just this weird, creepy sounding monster that's been built up.
Right.
You know?
Well, not been built up, is thrown off like without a second thought.
Oh yeah, like I mean, not built. It's built up because we know that he's scared.
Okay.
You know, like it's not like we learn about it by reputation or anything, but it's just this like little like, you ever seen this thing? And
like,
you just know that like
so somehow this thing he says, this nonsense word follows, and I have no idea what the connecting steps are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Zadok freaks out because he thinks somebody's seen him and screams and runs inland and presumably escapes, but probably dies.
Probably dies. Is never seen again. Like the feds don't find him. Like I think the narrator names him as an informant, but he doesn't turn up in any searches.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he goes, the narrator's like, oh, well, that's weird. And,
and he thinks that this is just like some kind of like either drunken fantasy or just like an allegory, like, oh, there must be some kernel of truth in this, but he is speaking in, you know, just this very quaint exaggeration, right?
Well, it reads like an allegory, right? Like it could be like, you know, this is what happens when people turn, because the town's not in great shape right now. It's like, this is what happens when people turn against religion, when people kind of look to these outside sources for their salvation and everything, and it's ruin, you know? So it makes sense as an allegory, but as we'll find out, it's not. So he tries to get out, but the bus has been, you know, forced it. Like the bus driver says, like, the bus is not going to run.
Conveniently.
Right? Like conveniently.
And
you know, decidedly,
I'll talk about what's cool about this. The sense of paranoia around this as the noose tightens, very effective. Like just the idea that like, okay, well, Zadok is attuned to this, and all throughout like the first 3 chapters, our narrator is like, well, this is just kind of dumb, it's overblown, you know, just folktale, urban legend kind of stuff. But like as the noose tightens and like, you know, he's done for now, and he doesn't realize it, and just like where he's slowly going to catch up to it, but like all throughout this, kind of knowing the punchline and kind of knowing that this is a Lovecraft thing, that nothing is going to turn out good, like it isn't going to be like sunshine and root beer at the end of this, is
even though there kind of is. It's like it's a weird story where there kind of is, but you definitely know that this is, you know, bad things are going to happen first,
right?
You have to work for that root beer.
So I was gonna get there, but like, you know, something bad is going to happen, and so like he really sells it in these small details. I think by throwing out a lot of detailed chaff almost. And then kind of like hitting these spikes, like when you're drifting off and somebody says a word that wakes you up.
Yeah. I love how the bus driver says like, oh, I'm sure Gilman will give you a good deal on the thing, because he knows that he's cheap, right? Like he, you know, he was like he took this super cheap bus. When he goes to the store, they talk about him buying cheese and crackers as like a lunch or something like that. Like he's very destitute, and like I love the idea of the bus driver knowing that and preying on it.
Yeah,
you know.
Again, like weird little food details, you know, after he checks into the hotel, he goes out to get a dinner and he's relieved to find out that all the food is packaged.
Yeah. Super cool. So he gets into the hotel room and he notices that there's no bolt on the door, but there was one formerly. Yeah, like recently. Like there's like a discoloration or something.
Yeah, and so he takes out his keychain multi-tool, which is described in loving detail. It is a modern marvel. Yeah. And he replaces the bolt using a piece from the dresser.
Yeah. So he's sleeping and he starts hearing the door being tested, which like that's a great horror.
You can just hear the scrape. Like,
yeah, just like somebody's trying to get in, and like that person didn't expect this to be locked. And these are old hotel rooms where they have, and sometimes you'll stay in a hotel and this is still the case, but where there are doors between the rooms. What was the point of that? I guess just to house larger families. Yeah.
Like I've seen that. I haven't seen like a continuous row of rooms like that, but sometimes they'll go to a hotel and it's like, okay, well they adjoin, and like, okay, we're going to stay together, but we don't want to have to go into the hallway or step outside in order to see each other.
Yeah,
I still see that like today, and hotels my family stays at.
Yeah. So so that's the case here. He has both of them kind of bolted, but he starts hearing these people and kind of things move around outside,
like below him too. He's on the very top floor. Like they've been trying to isolate him, keep him from escaping.
Yeah. Yeah. So we enter into this kind of chase scene here, which is where I think the geography of the town pays off. Even though again, like it's still too much.
Yeah.
But it's like him knowing the town really well and knowing how to get out, I think makes sense here.
Yeah, I would much rather him just be canny at spotting opportunities than like describing, line by line a map of the town like that.
Yeah.
That to me like takes all of the air out of what otherwise should be a very tense, and is still pretty tense. Like, like you are seeing his thought process, but this is happening at like 1/10 real time.
Yeah. Yeah. It works for me, but I see your point.
Yeah.
If you want to see an idealized version of this is the best sequence in Dark Corners of the Earth.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite sequences in games. Like,
yeah.
It comes across really well.
And I was reading this. So like I've read the story several times, once before and then once after playing Dark Corners of the Earth. Like that sequence is a very faithful adaptation of this.
Yeah.
Just like the way the rooms are arranged and, like moving, he's moving like dressers and bedsides against the doors to like bar progress as he moves along, and then looking out and spotting, opportunities outside the window and making his jump and things like that. Like that is like a way to feel this piece of text in a way that like is much more tactile than you otherwise would get a chance to, unless you arrange like the game situation.
Yeah, well, it's just like a really nice companion piece to this.
Yeah,
like even the whole first part of that game like feels great.
Yeah.
With this and just is a piece and matches really well with it. Eventually, he looks out the window, he sees a roof that he can jump to. They eventually bust down the door, and what he's doing, like we said, he's putting dressers in the way, latching doors behind him, etc. And eventually, after blocking the way, uses this curtain in order to bridge the gap and get across. And gets down to the streets, and he's kind of moving from shadow to shadow, and they're hunting him down.
Yeah.
And as they're hunting him down, he also sees these lights flashing from the reef, and they're communicating with the roof of on the Gillmen.
Yeah.
Like there's like code going back and forth, which like that's a great detaal.
Yeah. Another detail I love, like after like it's determined that he's at large, they both start glowing like just constantly. Like it like just this is the visual equivalent of a siren, like somebody is at large.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then eventually he gets a real good look of a deep one that's coming out. And the reason why, they're communicating is they're just like, hey, this guy knows our secrets. Like we can't let him escape. And also we don't want him to escape for other reasons. So let's get out the big guns.
Yeah.
And he gets to see the deep one, this kind of like hobbling fish frog kind of thing.
With an elliptical head, bulging eyes, and just kind of this like shambling, almost like simian kind of quality. Like they move around like gorillas and they communicate by barking like dogs.
Yes.
And so like as he describes them, like I know how they're presented in the game and they look kind of like hunters from like Resident Evil, but like as he describes them, they're almost like these comical chimeras a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I can't help but see a like a fish's head just kind of bolted on top of a slimy frog.
It's a weird thing that Lovecraft has a hard time being impressionistic about stuff. Like it's why the escape, which would emotions and adrenaline would compress detail, but he expands on it because he has to say, like, you get the sense that he can't allow a thing not to be explained. Like he doesn't want any questions like, oh, how did he get from this room to this room? And it's the same thing when he tries to describe monsters, is he tries to be impressionistic and just say like, oh, it had aspects of this monster, and this monster. And like, if you squint your eyes right, it works. But it's kind of hard to do, and sometimes it just ends up being like literally this thing's arms with this thing's head and this thing's
it's weird because it works in silhouette, like it works when the light's behind it, but when it's in front of it, it doesn't work for me. Yeah,
and this is something where like I think the expanded kind of universe really helps.
Oh yeah,
like
definitely.
Artists have taken the most charitable version of like what he's going for and interpreted them, and it's like those end up being the canon versions. But when you actually look at the text, like sometimes it's more goofy than anything.
Yeah, my mind does a find replace and it's kind of like, okay, like let's pretend this is not as goofy. But like when I'm in there highlighting it and taking notes on it, it's like, oh, like by the letter, this is kind of dumb. But like
the actual words.
That doesn't matter because you can fill in. Like, it's weird. He either doesn't provide enough detail or he provides way too much. And like the truth is somewhere in the middle where your imagination just kind of fills in the feeling of what he's trying to get at with all these facts.
Yeah. So he eventually makes his way out of town on this railroad track through the marshes. And this area is actually just kind of like pocked with these warrens of deep ones. Like this is where they live on land, like outside of town or something like that.
Yeah.
And some of them are wearing clothes, like they're dressed up like priests, like they have tiaras and stuff.
Yeah.
But he actually manages to avoid them.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm kind of unclear about the way this resolves. I went back and read this several times, but they're like, it's just kind of like moments that are, like separated by more time than I think they ought to be. Like he's ultimately saved by fainting.
Yeah.
And I can't,
he
think,
has to faint. He's
right.
That's what they do.
Yep. And I can't help but think that like he didn't actually escape. They just let him because they knew. I think that's
ultimately what happened.
Right.
Is that like they eventually found him because he was passed out, but then they like got a closer look at him, like when I said like they were hunting him down for that reason, I don't think that's actually the case. I think until they get up close to him and like smell him and lift up his tail and stuff, they don't know what's going on with him.
Right.
So I think that's probably what happened. So he wakes up at noon the next day, which is a long time to faint, I guess. I don't know how long fainting lasts, but in movies it's a couple minutes.
He parlayed it into a nap.
Yeah, he had a busy day. Like why is like he'll roll with it.
He's tuckered out, Yeah,
he's all tuckered out. So he cancels the rest of his trip because duh.
And, it just kind of had a life-changing thing. Like you have to go like petition the government.
Yeah. So that's what he does. He goes and he's like, hey, like we got to take care of this shit.
Yeah.
And gets some stuff kind of happening, like gets the government involved with Innsmouth. And as he's doing so, he's kind of doing some research and learns about these kind of strange happenings on his mother's side of the family.
Yeah.
He had an uncle who went crazy and killed himself, and a grandmother who developed this horrible, like, unblinking stare. Yeah. Which I love, an unblinking stare. And then most notably, he has a cousin who went crazy and was committed to an asylum.
Yes.
With some kind of horrible deformity.
Yes, that developed way later in life than those things generally do.
Yes.
And so he just kind of continues pursuing this line of inquiry obsessively, leaving Arkham and going back to, his place in northern Ohio and Cleveland and Canton and Toledo, looking into this. And he finds out the scariest detail here is great grandmother had some jewelry that was fine to wear in Europe, but was told not to wear in New England. This grandmother he kind of mentioned offhand earlier on as he was talking about why he was in this region, who was educated in France but came back. Her name was also Marsh.
Yes. So for the slow people in the audience, I mean, we're supposed to figure this out before the protagonist does. Like it doesn't need to work as a twist, right. I think, for it to work. So he, in 1930, he starts having these dreams. He'd be kind of unable to close his eyes for long periods of time. And in dreams, he thinks about his grandmother being under the sea as in a phosphorescent palace of many terraces with gardens of strange leprous corals and grotesque brachiate efflorescences.
Yep.
The dream grandma tells him, hey, you cannot escape your destiny.
Yeah. Like you can't do what your uncle did, by exactly. killing himself to forestall this this transformation. Like, you're going to come see me one day. And this isn't a dream. This is communication.
Yes. Exactly. And so he kind of learns through this that the deep ones are going to arise. They're going to exact the tribute that Cthulhu craves because they've got what Cthulhu's crave. And he dreams of a Shoggoth. He starts, he's having all these dreams, and he wakes up with this look. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh shit, it's happening to me. And he's on the cusp of killing himself, which is the ending of Arthur German, which is another Lovecraft story.
Yeah, that has the same core of this. Like, he learns about some horrible ancestry. He's mixed with something terrible and, decides to kill himself because of it. Instead, he goes the other way. Like, this is the point where he had just written the account that we have read so far, right? And
I love that in reading what we just read, that's when he turns pro Fishman. I really like the way this ends. We did on our Slack channel, we have a Lovecraft book club thing that meets roughly monthly, and we did Shadow Over Innsmouth for the first entry, and we were talking about this, and I love the ending of this so much because it's so non-Lovecraft, right? Like it's so not I might as well die if I don't have this thing. It's like this last paragraph, it suggests a story that they don't do, but the story they suggest is amazing. Yeah. Where he's going to plan a prison break to get his cousin out, and then together they're going to go to Marvel Shadowed Innsmouth. We shall swim out to that brooding reef in the sea and dive down through black abysses to Cyclopean and many-columned Yahanathel, And in that layer of the deep ones, we shall dwell amidst wonder and glory forever.
Yeah, a new purpose, right? Like
yeah.
his humanity was holding him back, and the bargain that they made is only destructive if you value what you once were. And go ahead.
Yeah, and when these modern values are kind of imposed upon it.
Right.
So like every time, and even what he did, even every time the government's involved, anytime like those people are involved, like it just ends up killing a bunch of these things, but it is a losing war. So when J. Edgar Hoover comes in with the Bergenworth College and decides to destroy, Innsmouth, like there's no getting, it's not going to succeed.
Right.
Like there's the same inevitability that happens in everything that happens, in every Lovecraft story, but here it's like embraced as opposed to just feared and sighed at. In a way that I really like.
Right. And it's succinct in a way that the rest of the story is not, right? Like it is not dwelling on these particular details of the way a doorknob is assembled, right? Like it's painting in these broad strokes, and it's a much more colorful world that has like much more promise than anything we've seen so far. And this could be, and probably is almost certainly, an unreliable narrator. This could be the, a part of the, the transformation is the change to his reason, right? Like he decides to lean into it as opposed to lean away from it. But like as it's presented, it is like this beautiful alternative to like be at the devil's right hand as opposed to in his path.
Yeah. I end up really, this works for me as an ending. And even the parts earlier where it's not paced very well, which I think is what you're talking about with the descriptions, like I can't objectively disagree with that. But at the same time, like when I read it, I was pretty riveted with it. At least the first time. Like I've read it since, and like, things don't stand when it's not new to you. Like this is the first long form Lovecraft thing I had read. So I was pretty blown away by it.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly I read it on the trip to and the trip back from Chicago on a train for my hometown, and it was like a great environment. Like reading on a train is great. It just worked. Yeah. Like super worked for me.
Yeah, the ending works for me as well. Like I like that it is not like, I like that he doesn't kill himself. I like that it is it subverts what you expect. And this is a later Lovecraft story, and like it's kind of him tying stuff together. We see Dagon here, we see Cthulhu, and those two stories were just different versions of each other. I'm not a scholar of the way the mythos comes together, but this is a very kind of cohesive work. And I can set those pacing issues aside. Maybe it helps that I've played the game and I can kind of gloss over the very prosaic details of which rooms doors are bolted and which ones aren't, and just kind of like plug and play my memory of that and the tension and the breath holding there. To get it, like there are any number of factors that make me willing to forgive that. But yeah, like, I think that if there's anything that links both of these works together, aside from it being, a cursed town by some, primeval force that we really don't understand, it is that sense of paranoia and like the sense of inevitability that something is going to claim you. They both end with, the protagonist embracing something that otherwise could have been feared because they kind of have no other option aside from oblivion. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Like it is, but they're kind of like two different, like kind of. I guess they're pretty similar in that respect. Like I was gonna say, there's just different takes on it, but it's just one of them is elaborated a little bit more. Like and this is very different than what's played in Bloodborne, where it's explicitly played to not like this thing that might have happened. Like who knows what would have happened with the fishing village in Bloodborne if it was left to be. Yeah. Like I like to think that they were more or less peaceful. But we don't know, and we will never know because of those shitheads in Bergenworth. So like it is kind of, either of these situations, if you think of these as kind of cautionary tales of that, it kind of there's nothing in Bloodborne to suggest this. I'm just thinking out loud. It reframes this as like that as a preventative action, as kind of like a good thing, if it stopped these two fates.
Isn't this a little bit of it reflects differently on the rebirth ending of Bloodborne, and maybe a little bit on like the kindling the fire ending of Dark Souls, a little bit of like, okay, you are going to be separated from what you once were. You're either going to be the, the ever-burning source of this thing that keeps the world turning, or you're going to shut off your former cares and become, God knows what.
Yeah, embrace literally, the abyss, like the unknown, like the what this thing is. And like, Dark Souls 1, they did a whole lot to kind of show us what that meant. But it also never showed, the same way that the snail people are happy and the deep ones are happy, those humanity sprites are not inherently like miserable. It's just other.
Yeah.
Like we don't like that because it looks terrible. And like the people inside the town, they writhe and everything, but that could be a pupae stage kind of thing.
Yeah.
Ultimately turning into these kind of pure forms of people.
Yeah.
And that pure form could either be mindless snail people, which I think are probably not that happy. But at least, they've got a placid smile. Like there's an ignorance to it. To like, a more directly kind of idealized version where it's like, deep ones are stronger than humans and immortal and have purpose and everything. Like that is humanity plus. Like you can make that argument.
Yeah, and they serve a real God that they can see. Like I'm not I'm not saying God isn't real or whatever like that. I'm not saying that, but like they're united under this banner.
Yes. Yeah, it is a purpose, And so like there's a lot of kind of like the thematic kind of similarities of these are pretty rich.
Yeah.
And it does make a lot of sense, specifically talking about Bergermirth, but also kind of Souls in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad we covered them.
Yeah. I don't mean to like do a postmortem while this thing is still alive on the table, but like I'm super excited for these other like explorations we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Like this has been fun.
I think this is probably the most like.
Like these are both like these are both super long. Like
super long, and then also like when we start talking about the thing, like I love the thing, but it is not as. It is more concise in what happens,
We covered roughly 900 pages of material in this 3 hours. So
yeah, indeed. So hopefully, do we have any other wrap up thoughts? I feel like we articulated it pretty well.
I think so too. Like both of these are like I would not hesitate to recommend either of them.
I think with Shadow Over Innsmouth, which I love, this is my favorite Lovecraft story. If you're hesitant because of that pacing and detail, find a book on tape version. It's not that long. It's like 2.5 hours or something like that. You can do it while playing a game and just have it on like a podcast. And having somebody read, specifically the inflections and everything helps a lot. I found that like when I revisited it, that's what I've done. I've read it twice and I've listened to it once, and listening to it was pretty great.
Yeah.
So specifically the dialect stuff helps with that a lot. And for God's sakes, play Dark Corners of the Earth. Like that game kind of falls apart in the end, but the ending of it is not a war crime. Like it's not the worst, it's not terrible. It's just not as good as the first part.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a good game and does a lot of cool shit. So recommended multiple ways of taking in these stories.
Yeah, and you can get into Uzumaki for less than $20 American. Like
totally.
it is readily available. It is a quick read. Don't be dissuaded by the apparent heft of the book.
It reads really fast. That was true when we did Berserk too, which is like, the individual volumes of Berserk. I ended up, I think we talked about this in the episode, but like I didn't buy 37 volumes of Berserk at $20 a piece. Like I'm not going to be in for $600 on the, on Bonfireside Chat. I ended up reading them online in various places, and like, manga just reads quick. Yeah. It's part of why like buying it, unless it's a complete story, feels like a bad value proposition to me. Because it goes by so quick. Yeah. And this is the case here as well. Yeah. And then Shadow Over Innsmouth is free. Like it is all the HP Lovecraft stuff is public domain. You can read it online, or you can listen. People have done podcasts and YouTubes of it and everything like that, because it's all available for everyone. Yeah. So I think going and investing the time in these is going to enrich not just your experience of Souls, but like a bunch of other stuff. Like these are both, kind of foundational. I was going to use the word foundational. I feel weird saying that about Uzumaki because it is so recent, but like it is such a pure strain, and like Ito's work has informed so much of what happened, like what's happened in horror imagery recently, that like I have to call it like required. If it's definitely mandatory. If it's not foundational, like foundational is a good word for Shadow Over Innsmouth. Right. For Uzumaki, it is embodying those foundations really, really well. Right. So like it's maybe, it is influential. I think throughout the years it will turn out to be, really, really important. But even as now, it is such a good example of like refining those kind of tropes, like the tropes that it deals in, and presenting a best possible universe version of them. Yeah. That it is like unqualified recommendation. Like this is like the most Like, I mean, I guess like the other last thing I felt this comfortable recommending was like Bloodborne. Like it's like as far as off-season stuff we've done, like, or I guess Shovel Knight, but like just like you have to play this. Whereas like like 3D Game.Heroes, like I like that game, but I can imagine the user that wouldn't like it. Like I think you should try it. It's a good game, but I can imagine somebody not, it just not being for them. Whereas like this is just like, man, you gotta get into this.
It's the difference between Kingsfield 4 and Kingsfield 4's soundtrack.
Yeah, totally. I mean, even though I will, yeah, exactly. Like Souls fans, you should try Kingsfield 4.
Right, yeah.
If you don't like Souls at all, yeah,
exactly.
You're probably fine.
One recommendation is moderately more qualified than the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, I feel very strongly that you should check this out. What do we do next time, Cole?
Well, Gary, next time we are starting in on Shadow Tower, which is From's kind of a follow-up to Kingsfield. It is a late PS1 era first-person action RPG survival horror game that is very difficult to get into, and I would recommend you check out Gary's. He's posted on Twitter a Twitlonger thing that is a kind of beginner's guide.
It is. It's easiest to find on our Facebook page.
Okay, cool.
Because it's a Facebook page post, and Twitlonger killed all the formatting, so there are all the bullet points and stuff that were in there, but you can still read it. It's all stuff that I would have liked to have known.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what. Go to Duckfeed.tv/news. There's going to be like a weekly post I'm going to try and do, and I'm going to include it in that. So
yeah, put it as a blog. It's a backer blog as well, but I didn't want to put a link to our backer backer blog. So like that's what it started as, but I wanted to share it because I know a lot of people are playing along. And it's all stuff that I wish I had known. Mm-hmm. Spoiler, I love that game. Like I think it's great, but I would have liked it. It would have been easier in the beginning if I would have known these things.
Right.
So it is a Souls game in that it has 1,000 esoteric fucking systems. So and knowing those is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing 2 episodes and an appendix on that. We're not quite sure what the split is going to be, or we haven't discussed it. Gary, you are in more of a position to talk about that than I am. And in that time warp that you haven't heard, that you didn't hear because I edited it out, we decided we're going to cut off after Fireworld. So if you're playing along and you want to not be spoiled on stuff that happens later in the game, at least beat the Fireworld before you listen to the first episode. Although there's not really much in the way of spoilers. Like that's not a thing here.
There isn't a lot of plot. Like there is some kind of weird suggestions of lore, but there's even less so than there was in Ancient City.
Yeah.
And we're doing some other stuff. We're going to cover the sequel to this game, Abyss, which I imagine will be a little bit more robust in that respect a little bit later in the season.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you have things to say about Shadow Tower, we are doing an appendix episode on that, unlike this episode. So you can hit us up at duckfeed.tv/contact. Mm-hmm. And we'll read your responses to Shadow Tower. Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
If you're one of like the 7 people who played it, like please write in.
Please do.
It's not a very popular game.
Well, we have a lot of people in the Slack, and I think that we can get some good stuff on that. Like it's good to see people being like, oh, this is super weird, and like people saying like, haha, finally my purchase of a Vita has justified itself.
Yeah. Dog, I can play Crypt of the Necrodancer all the time now.
I know, it's great. I love my Vita. I have not regretted it for a second.
No, it's pretty great. I've been playing Necrodancer in bed, and it's a way to get really hyped up to not be able to sleep. If you want to join that Slack channel, as we mentioned, and read those backer blogs that we mentioned, you can do so by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/DuckFeedTV. Mm-hmm. It is a good value. I feel comfortable in saying that, like, at the very least, I mean, you support as much as you can or want to, but like the $2 value, which gives you the backer blogs, and the Slack channel, is like such an amazing amount, like content for money ratio. It's like the best community online and has not taken a shit at all yet. So it just the past 6 months with that Slack has really brought the community forward in my mind as like one of the most important parts of what we do. Obviously we need listeners to have a community or whatever. Like this thing doesn't exist without you, but like my priorities are shifting in that regard, and in a really, really good way. And so I would say that everybody is welcome, and it is like honestly one of the most positive, supportive places on the internet. Yeah, and if I'm saying it's a undespoiled paradise, and you're just like rubbing your hands together like a fly, thinking you can take a giant shit on it, please don't.
Yeah,
it is civility is demanded there, but think of it, it's a place where civility is demanded.
Yeah. We are benevolent dictators. But yeah, so that is at patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. There's all kinds of stuff, extra content, postcards, things like that. Go check it out. We encourage it. And if you have already taken the step of backing it, we genuinely appreciate it. We have the Facebook page, facebook.com/bonfiresidechat, and a P.O. Box at Duckfeed.tv, P.O. Box 27105, Cincinnati, Ohio 45227.
Indeed. I think that's probably about it.
Yeah, this has been a super sized episode, but I've had a great time recording it.
Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah. Super fun. And hopefully, what should they do until next time, Cole?
They should run away from every spiral they see. Gary, I'm tired.
Join us in the sea to frolic forever in the phosphorescent fields of our true gods, or what have you.
Oh, the effervescence of leprous coral.
Take the third oath.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon